Good evening. Welcome to the Brisbane City Council meeting of July 18th. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Please note for the record that all council members are present except for Council Member Conway.
Can we have a report out from closed session?
Council met in closed session about 2 items, nothing to report out. Thank you.
Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. I understand we are pulling item number 7 under item A for new business. Is that correct?
Correct.
Any other adjustments to be made?
No.
Yes, ma'am. If we could also pull, under consent calendar, if we could pull item number D, please. We had a bid protest come in late. We haven't had a chance to review that with the city attorney's office.
Okay.
No,
Hold on.
It's the Fire Station 81 standby generator project.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion with those adjustments?
make a motion to approve the agenda. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to oral communications number 1. I do have 2 slips currently. We'll start with Dana Dilworth.
I had a couple of items. One was about what's been done in closed session, and I made those comments available to you. I would like for the public to know the status and what's going on and what the intentions are of the sale of the properties in the Brisbane Acres. And secondly, I wanted to actually say that it's brilliant that you're considering some part of the property of Dolby. I've been out there many times hiking in the area, and the area, particularly along the railroad track, has reverted back to native. There used to be, in the spring, it is lovely, but every once in a while, people come and just totally gut all the growth there. And so I would hope that when we become, or if we become owners of this land, that we consider the stewardship from it because of its location close to the San Bruno Mountain. And there's a final item on the agenda during Mayor Council Matters Ad Hoc Committee Study of Charter Schools. I don't want to give my whole letter, but I do want to say that as a credentialed school teacher, I want to know to what degree there's a collective effort with district help, what degree of community is involved. Since the future school might be accessible by rail, why isn't this being discussed on a more regional scale? I would also like to know the credentials of the people being considered to do the study. Actually, frankly, I object to the study being done because it was done before citizens approved and we were blindsided by the outcome when the structure was built in Daly City. With the flux of schooling, more coordination with middle colleges, the advent of online schooling, I wonder whether we should be thinking in small districts. I have observed school districts be absolutely cannibalized by charter schools, and it is our district I'm speaking of. They are getting the newest, the charter schools are getting the newest and best facilities, while our older facilities crumble. Personally, I don't think charter schools are the answer. I have taught in them as well. I personally don't think you should spend public funds to study a way to further gut the public school system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Randy and Michelle DeZitzer.
Hi, Honorable Council and Madam Mayor. We just want to, thank you guys for the last few years and helping us kind of build our business. Unfortunately, we had to come down and not continue it, but we want to continue further in Brisbane. And one of the things we ask for you to consider is opening up the zoning for other cannabis operations in other zones, for distribution, manufacturing, and delivery. It is very difficult to find rentals, not only because of size, but a lot of the facilities are owned by large real estate investment firms. So if we have a chance to kind of open up the zones a little bit, it gives kind of smaller companies a chance to keep fighting the good fight.
Also, I just wanted to add to Michelle's statement, as we may have spoken about in the past, for cannabis businesses, your license is directly tied to the property. So if you lose your property, you can obviously no longer continue your business. So by having more options out there in Brisbane, it gives an opportunity for companies that either are interested to come into Brisbane and that can't find a suitable property in Crocker because of the current ownership situation that just the Crocker has, as well as a lot of the properties, Michelle said, are large in size, which is not suitable for most small to medium cannabis companies. But there's other zones out there in Brisbane. Just off the top of my head, M1 comes to mind, but it gives an opportunity for companies that either can't make it work in Crocker or could not make it work in Crocker, an opportunity to still continue in Brisbane for those similar activities. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know that at some point this was, I think, discussed about, I know definitely for retail it was discussed. Is it possible that the cannabis subcommittee could take a look at that? Particularly industrial way?
Yeah, if you want to agendize it for a subcommittee meeting, we could do that.
Are you amenable to that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I have no other slips for oral communications. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll go ahead and move to presentations. Item A, proclaiming July as Parks and Recreation Month. So, do you want me to read the proclamation first? Sounds good. Okay. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Brisbane designating July as Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the City of Brisbane, and whereas our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of the community and region. And whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally and physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetation buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and reflect outdoors. And recreate outdoors. Reflecting is good too. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Brisbane recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Brisbane City Council that this July is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Brisbane. So thank you, Noreen, for being here this evening. I understand you want to say a little something.
I'll be quick. I know you have a full meeting tonight, but good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. It's my honor and privilege to come in front of you every year and share all the wonderful things that we're doing in Parks and Recreation to benefit and enrich the lives of our residents. For the size of our city, our Parks and Recreation programs are fairly robust, and we have a lot to be proud of. With support from our City Council, we have been able to deliver high-quality programs and services, thus improving the quality of life for Brisbane residents. In honor of National Parks and Recreation Month, staff published an activities calendar encouraging residents to get out and take advantage of all the opportunities here in town. We included organized activities on Wednesdays during the lunch hour for employees, which have included a hike on Crocker Trail and volleyball at the sand volleyball courts. We've also organized additional activities in the park for residents prior to the summer concerts, which have included lawn games, scavenger hunts, and a carnival later this month. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our Park and Rec commissioners, as well as our team of dedicated Parks and Recreation staff, who firsthand get to witness the difference that they make in the lives of our residents every day. I've compiled a short video using photos from just the past 12 months to demonstrate the impact that recreational opportunities have on our community. Enjoy, and thank you again for your ongoing support of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Noreen.
Thank you.
I swear every year when this presentation rolls around, like I'm so excited for it, but I dread it at the same time because I'm always like, this year is going to be the year where I'm not going to get teary-eyed over the park and recreation presentation, and I couldn't do it this year. It got me. I'm like about to start crying. We live in such a special place called Brisbane. We are all so blessed to be here and to live here, and it's just so amazing when we can step back and we can look at what it is to be a citizen of Brisbane and what it means to live here. And so often, you know, we have these big problems and these huge challenges, and you know, there are times when just things don't go right. But when we can zoom out and we can really understand like all that we do have, it's so special. So I'm glad that we take that opportunity every year to do this. And we've had so many new sorts of park and recreation events this year, like LunaFest, and we had, you know, the race on the mountain before Star City Music Festival, and you know, these things are going to continue to occur. So thank you so much for that presentation, and I swear next year I'm not going to cry again, but you never know. Okay. Does anyone else want to say anything, or are we good?
I'm all choked up.
Well, once you start talking, it gets way worse, let me tell you. Okay, well, I'll present this to you afterwards. All right. So that brings us to a commendation of Eagle Scout Stephen Tom. And I have a commendation here. Just gotta wipe off those tears first. Okay, Stephen, where are you at? Come on up. We have to recognize you. A commendation on behalf of the City of Brisbane on this date, July 18th, 2019. I commend Stephen Tom for completing a volunteer community project as an Eagle Scout candidate that involved a restoration project on Quarry Trail Park. Thanks to your leadership, you helped create a newly improved park and community space that community members will enjoy for many years to come. Thank you so much, Stephen, for all of your work. I see you have a lot of patches there. Yeah. Do you, not to put you on the spot or anything, but would you mind just giving us, you know, a brief overview of what you've done here and a little bit about the project?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you can see from some of these pictures, the main goal of the project was to restore the pathway that was once there many years ago. So as you can see that top picture, like the pathway is kind of not able to be seen. But once we kind of took out all the weeds that were, you know, on the side of the pathway, you can now see the pathway, and it's nice to walk on now. Mm-hmm.
Great. How long did this take you?
It took about 8 hours. Yeah.
And did you do this? So it was you and
our 11
rest of your scouts?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your efforts. I'm sure if you want to get another badge, I'm sure we could find some more things for you to do. We could give you another commendation. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and present this to you. We could take a picture.
Yeah.
Well, why don't I just come down?
Thank you.
Okay, and now we are going to have a riveting presentation from California High-Speed Rail Preferred Alternative presentation.
I don't know if I can elicit quite the same reaction as the Parks and Rec. So
I might start crying, but it might be for another reason.
So good evening, and thank you for having me. My name is Boris Lipkin. I'm the Northern California Regional Director for the California High-Speed Rail Authority, and happy to be here and look forward to giving you the update on what we're doing and the latest with our process here in Northern California. Before I kind of dive into the slides, just to kind of take a step back, because we've been in the news quite a bit over the last 6 months, and so it's probably worthwhile to spend at least 30 seconds kind of describing what was happening with Governor Newsom and what he's asking of the authority and what that means for the program and how we're moving forward. So in Governor's State of the State speech in February, he laid out his priorities for how he wanted to deliver the statewide high-speed rail system. He's supportive of getting the entire system built, but he asked us to focus on building blocks based on available resources and do kind of 3 key things. In the Central Valley, where we're already under construction, build everything we can, basically. So get all the way to Merced, get all the way down to Bakersfield, get that into service. In where we have commitments to bookend projects, so Caltrain electrification here in the north, similar projects in Southern California, maintain those commitments, get those projects done. In the rest of the system, so Northern California and Southern California, advance our next step is the environmental clearance process, get everything shovel ready, and look for additional funding to get those parts built, with Northern California being the next step. And so what I'm going to be talking about is kind of our next step in that process and identifying the state's preferred alternatives going into the draft environmental documents. And then I'll talk kind of generally the reason for the staff recommendation in the upfront, and then we can zoom into Brisbane and the light maintenance facility in particular and talk about some of the details with that as well. So we've been at this for a while, but where we're at right now is we have released the staff recommendations for the state's preferred alternative. This has been a long process, doing many technical analyses as well as getting feedback from stakeholders and communities along the route. Right now we're focused on the differentiators between the alternatives that we have in the project section. We have 2 alternatives. I'll cover what those are and the differences between them. Both alternatives will be analyzed fully during the draft environmental document, but at this stage we're focused on those things that differentiate the 2 alternatives. Right now, we're in the process of gathering feedback on the staff recommendations to bring that back to our board of directors in September when they meet to give us direction for the draft environmental document. In sort of translating for those who are familiar with CEQA, this is sort of identifying the proposed project as the equivalent step for those who are familiar with that. What this means is basically, instead of how some agencies might have staff just release that to the public, our board has asked that we release a staff recommendation, go out, vet that with communities along the way, stakeholders and others, and then bring that back to them so that they can give us direction, hold that for themselves. And then finally, identifying the state's preferred alternative is not a final decision. It's not approving the project. This is the last step going into the draft environmental document, which will provide additional opportunities for feedback and input. So with, this is in PDF. So the process of getting to this stage has been about 15 years in the making. We've been at it looking at different alignments, different alternatives. The thing I'll highlight there's a lot on this slide, but kind of the key milestone in this process was in 2012 when we reached an agreement with Caltrain and other regional stakeholders in terms of the entire route from San Francisco to San Jose, moving to what's called a blended system, where we're going to be electrifying the Caltrain corridor and sharing those tracks with the Caltrain system instead of building whole separate infrastructure for high-speed rail in the corridor. From there, Caltrain moved forward with the environmental clearance for electrification, and that's now under construction. And we continue to plan for the blended system, which is how both those systems work together, what's the needed infrastructure for high-speed rail on top of the Caltrain system, and what they've already got here, and then moving that now into the environmental process and studying that going into the 2018 business plan, which identified the valley-to-valley line from Bakersfield to San Francisco is where we want to start service. It gets into the location of maintenance facilities for us as well. Along the way, in just the last couple of years, we've had lots of engagement with communities and stakeholders. This is just I think one of our staff referred to this as the measles chart of different agencies that we've been working with and getting valuable input on designs and process, and of course we've been in communication with the city as well during that process. Along with the agency partners, we've also had over 500 community engagements over the last 3 years. This has ranged from community working group meetings, which are focused stakeholders from organizations around the region. We've had CSCG and LPMG meetings, including with the Mayor Pro Tem who sits on that committee, open houses, and then lots of other engagement throughout that process. All of this is kind of leading up to where we are on the right side of the chart. Right now we're in those last kind of 2 months in that blue bar, getting kind of the feedback on the staff recommendations, bringing that to the September 2019 board meeting. So in terms of what we're studying in San Francisco to San Jose, there are a number of features that are common between the two alternatives and a couple of things that differentiate them. So the common features are the location of the high-speed rail stations. So we're studying the 4th and King station in San Francisco because there's a separate process with the Transway Joint Powers Authority to get them to the Salesforce Transit Center. We have a station in Millbrae, and then we have a station in Diridon. That's part of our San Jose to Merced project section. We're looking at upgrading the track to be able to operate it up to 110 miles an hour. And then in terms of operations, we're studying 4 in peak hour service, 4 high-speed trains, and then the already planned and scheduled 6 Caltrain trains per hour. Along the way, other kind of common features, and I'll go through this quickly, are changes to the Broadway and Atherton Caltrain stations, other safety modifications at grade crossings and stations. And what that generally looks like is basically having the two systems share the tracks, looking to stay within the existing right-of-way, minimizing effects to communities along the way. In the project section, we do have 2 key features that are differentiators between the alternatives. We have alternative A, which has the location of the light maintenance facility on the east side of the tracks in Brisbane and the Bayland site. That one does not have a passing track in the middle of the corridor. Alternative B has the location of the light maintenance facility on the west side of the tracks in Brisbane and has a passing track between San Mateo and Redwood City. That's the big blue line in the middle of the corridor. We can get into some of the history of how we got to those 2 options. The other kind of locations that we had looked at were the Port of San Francisco and at SFO. Those were eliminated along the way because of major impacts that they would have in order to be able to get to those facilities, and on the airport being at capacity at this stage, not having the land available for a large facility that we need in order to have be close to the startup of service in San Francisco for the system. These are the 2 drawings and kind of plan view from the top of the light maintenance facility. As you'll see, it's on the east side. It's past the tank farm and onto kind of the middle, and then having a flyover on the north side to get back onto the corridor. On the west side, it's sandwiched in between Bayshore and the existing rail line. The passing tracks are 6 miles between San Mateo and Redwood City. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today. So the analysis that we've done is really looking at the balance between the alternatives and looking at those differentiators across 3 sets of categories. System performance and operations, this is sort of the high-speed rail side of things, environmental factors, and community factors. A couple of these are particularly applicable when we talk about the 2 options here for the light maintenance facility. The staff recommendation is to go with alternative A, so that's the East Brisbane light maintenance facility location and no passing track in the middle of the corridor. And I'll quickly cover the reasons behind the staff recommendation. When we looked at the system performance characteristics, the main trade-offs that we saw with the passing track in the middle of the corridor was operating speed for us and for Caltrain. We lose a couple of minutes on high-speed rail when we don't have the passing track. Caltrain gains a couple of minutes. That didn't seem significant enough to want to build that extra infrastructure when we looked at the various service plans in the corridor. Across the factors in community that we had looked at, there's a lot less disruption when we were building less infrastructure, including in terms of the land uses that are planned for the site in the general plan. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then in terms of environmental factors, there are both wetlands and protected species on the west side of the location, the site. They aren't on the east side, which from an environmental factor and set of factors and regulatory standpoint are important considerations. Lastly, this is, I think Caltrain's going to be talking about the business plan. What we're clearing is getting up to the 6 and 4 level of service, which is their baseline scenario. I'm not going to delve too deeply into that, but the analysis for the infrastructure is based on that same level of service plans. So when we summarize in summary form, the basis for the recommendation of alternative A is having fewer displacements, lower capital costs, fewer impacts on natural and environmental resources, a little bit slower travel time for high-speed rail, a little bit faster for Caltrain, and then alignment on the business from the business plan. In front of you, there's a fact sheet that has all of this information. There's numbers behind all of these analyses, and you can peruse that, and it describes the process that we've gone through as well. So getting to kind of the site and the land use and development impacts, when we were looking at the two locations on the east and the west of the tracks, both of them potentially reduce available land for development at Brisbane Baylands. Alternative A sticks on to the commercial side of it and has the facility further away from the mixed use acreage that is on the orange area on the top on the west side, and it has a smaller overall footprint. So from those considerations, we saw an advantage to alternative A. Alternative B would also convert 8 acres of land at Icehouse Hill, which does have environmental impacts which are not present in alternative A.
Can I ask a question really quick? Can you go back a couple slides?
Yeah.
One more. Okay. So this is the best that I can describe it, but why are these drawn like a fanny pack? In that there is all this space around that would seem to be like, what are you going to put there? You know, it's not a nice, neat area, which I think, yeah, you might only be taking 93 or 90 acres, but I think you really limit the things that can go in the little tiny spaces in between and that you're not taking. So I'm sure there's a rationale for that, and I would really like to hear it.
Sure. The reason that I think I would describe it as a bit of a python, maybe swallowing.
Maybe. Yes.
Some
this is an interesting shape.
So the way that kind of a light maintenance facility works is that you start with a lead track. So this is how the trains get to the facility. That's generally kind of the smaller strip that you see. Especially when we look at the north side of the facility, what that entails is for a train going southbound, they need to get across, and so it involves basically a bridge for the train to go across, and that requires some space. Then it spreads out as all of the different tracks are needed, so that's kind of the big part in the middle of the facility. That's where all the storage, all the maintenance happens, that's where all the different functions of the facility take place, and then it skinnies back down in order to get back to the corridor. So that's the reason that it kind of needs both the north and the south end to be able to have access from both sides. And then it needs space in the middle for all of the key functions.
So the space in the middle that doesn't have blue lines through it, I'm looking at alternative A.
Yeah.
So that would still be land you would take, or that little strip of red?
So
right there.
Are you talking about this part?
Yes.
So this, I think, is the tank farm, if I'm not... That's where, so that's Kinder Morgan. We're not touching that. So the reason it swings out this way is to avoid that particular facility.
Okay.
That's sorry, if I may, on alternative B, the reason that we hug the rail corridor more and we don't have that swing out is because there isn't a similar facility on that side that we would need to be avoiding.
So can I ask a question? The writing that is on the east side, what does that say?
Sorry, the legend you mean, or?
I think it says Tunnel Avenue here.
Oh, Tunnel, this is Tunnel Avenue.
But that's not the existing Tunnel Avenue.
Yeah, so it would require a reconfiguration of Tunnel Avenue. So if I switch to the next slide, this is sort of the, we wanted to show this as well. So this is an aerial view from up top. This is the strip that Mary, you were talking about and asking us, is this part of it on the bottom here?
I see.
So Tunnel Avenue would end up shifting further towards 101. And then the other change, and we have spent a lot of time talking with city staff about this, would be from Lagoon and Tunnel coming in. Tunnel would go, this is over the rail corridor here, go to Bayshore, and then come into Valley Drive and then connect from Valley Drive over to Old Country. So that's this path past the fire station. So it would be a change in the alignment of Tunnel Avenue and how it gets towards the city.
So it's Old County Road, but that's okay. But it also means really changing the entrance to Brisbane and the, that's the traditional feel of Brisbane.
So we recognize that, and we have done a lot of work looking at different ways that could be configured. I believe got a piece of feedback from one of your staff, I think Randy or John, who said it's not the worst thing they've ever seen. I think Clay disagreed with that, so I will give credit to city manager as well.
So he said it was the worst thing he's seen, basically.
Maybe not in so many words. Not in so many words. But still, the switching and overpasses are going to add a lot of extra roadway in that area.
So the road changes from this overpass that exists today to going across and then past the fire station, and then this being the path towards Old County. So this
And the fire station moves over there.
this is the fire station right here.
It moves. Yes, that's the. Okay, because I just see down here, it looks like relocate fire station. There's a new proposed site. Yeah?
You wanna?
Or no?
No, there's no.
This is James Tung, who's our.
So what is that little then outline, square outline there?
Why don't you come on up?
What is that referring to?
Yeah, it says relocate fire station.
Reconfigure. So we'd have to look at ways to work with the fire station.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
This is James Tung, our project manager for the San Francisco San Jose project.
It does say relocate, but it could more accurately say reconfigure. It could be enough room there to reconfigure the fire station. It's a matter of working with the fire chief and figuring out what could work over there with moving the fire trucks in and out of the facility. But it is an impact. We do have to touch it.
Or Randy would like to say something.
So we don't have nearly the details to make that assessment yet, ma'am, but the city engineer and the fire chief's initial assessment is it's going to be a relocation.
And would that be the site?
It's an opportunity to consider
Potential.
other sites. Yes, ma'am.
Potential. Okay. Sorry to interrupt your whole thing, but I was
No. These are
we have the slide here, so let's just talk about it.
That is why the slides are specifically here to have this conversation.
Okay.
So you're right on point. I only have a couple more slides, so I promise we can. The last thing, just the process from here going forward. As I mentioned, so right now we have the staff recommendations out. We're holding our community working group meetings in July. We're going out to the public with open houses in August, and then bringing all of that back to the September board meeting, which will be held in the region. The board will meet in San Jose. At that time, from there, that gives us the last piece of input that we need for the draft environmental document, which will be published in March of next year, opening a 45-day public comment period with public hearings, ongoing engagement, and then looking to finalize the environmental document in March of 2021. Just in terms of the upcoming meetings, the San Mateo County Community Working Group will meet at the Burlingame Library next week. That's next Wednesday. And then the open house in San Mateo will be on August 19th at Sequoia High School in Redwood City. Of course, there's also meetings in San Francisco, which may be closer to here. In terms of providing feedback, we're looking for feedback from members of the public, communities, cities, and others by August 22nd in order to get that into the staff report for the board of directors. You can either email us comments or provide it to us at our Northern California office. Of course, we'll also be taking feedback during the open houses and at the authority board meeting in September. That August 22nd deadline is just for us to be able to include the feedback in our staff report. Anything that we get after that point we'll also provide to the board, but it just will not be reflected in the staff report at that stage.
Okay.
Can you give any information on the, I guess on your slide 27, the biological and aquatic resources? And you've got a picture of Visitation Creek. What is your intention at that area?
Sure. So Visitation Creek, do you want to, maybe I'll give that to James in terms of talking about Visitation Creek, because it runs across both parts of the site, on both sides. But
So for alternative A, we do have a light maintenance facility going right over the creek. And so we know that we do have to do something with the section that we're going over, perhaps put it in a culvert and then having a daylight at the end of the facility. This is something that we're working with BCDC on. It is under their jurisdiction. So we're in the process of working out a solution to this impact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Were you the one that had a long list of questions?
I do. So
Okay.
if other council members want to go first.
Yeah, I was just
maybe
gonna
check off.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay. Other than the question you just asked, do you have anything else, Terry?
Well, I've been through a lot of this in the local policymaker group and the updates that we've gotten. So I think a lot of my questions have been, I won't say answered, but discussed in other ways. So I'd rather have people go first, and some of mine is skepticism more than questions. So.
Comments. All right.
I'm staying in listening mode at this point.
Okay, that brings us to you, Cliff.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Okay. Okay, so where to start? So, right now I'm just trying to get a little bit of an understanding of, the benefit, right, of bringing high-speed rail through the corridor. So, what is the maximum speed that the high-speed rail can go from San Jose to San Francisco? Or I should say, what's the average speed that the high-speed rail train can travel?
So it's different in different parts of the system. So we're building a statewide system, right?
Yeah, but I'm just talking about San Jose to San Francisco.
The maximum speed between San Francisco and San Jose will be up to 110 miles an hour.
Okay, but what's probably about the average speed?
I mean, it's going to be somewhere in the 40 or so during peak time when there's lots of trains on the system. It's about 40 minutes or somewhere in the 40-minute range to get from San Francisco to San Jose.
Okay, so if you had, say, current baby bullet train, Caltrain train.
So that takes about 60 minutes right now. But I think the main thing with high-speed rail isn't a trip between San Francisco to San Jose. You have Caltrain service for those kinds of trips.
I'm not asking you to give me an explanation about that. I'm just asking the speed, right? So how much of a difference between the maximum speed that an electrified Caltrain train can run compared to a high-speed rail train?
So the current
is it about the same?
Maximum speed is 80 miles an hour for the Caltrain system, which will be the same after electrification. Once the corridor is upgraded for 110 mile an hour operations, both systems will run at the same maximum speed.
So they'll be about the same.
The key difference will be the number of stops that you have between. We only have one stop between San Francisco and San Francisco.
Yeah, I know, and but of course you could potentially get off at San Jose, get onto a Caltrain train or a high-speed rail train that was similar to a Caltrain train, and take that into San Francisco. And once you get on the train, it'd be the same, about the same distance. I mean, the same amount of time.
It would be the same maximum speed, and they would depend on the service plans that Caltrain would operate, and generally those would be slower, and it would also require passengers to transfer and get off a train and get onto something else, pay an extra fare, do all those things, which from a customer perspective is not something that.
Yeah, I understand that. It would be a little bit of an inconvenience for that passenger getting off high-speed rail train, getting on a train that would be similar to a Caltrain train. So, but to bring the trains through that corridor is a significant amount of money. So, to upgrade the corridor, with all the, with all the infrastructure, because you mentioned how many trains are going to be passing through every hour. I mean, that we already have a big backup in places like Burlingame that have to wait for trains. So, to do those great separations, and to build the 100-acre rail yard, what kind of dollars are we talking about? We're in the hundreds of millions?
So the entire statewide system is $77 billion.
Yeah, I'm talking about the corridor.
In the corridor, I believe the estimate is $2.6 billion between San Francisco and San Jose.
Okay, all right, so $2.6 billion to provide that additional level of service for that end user.
And to comply with the legislation that authorized us to build a statewide system to begin with.
Yeah, okay. So, you talked about the tunnel bridge being demolished. And then, of course, we'd have to have a new bridge, to get from the 101 to Brisbane. We'd have to relocate the fire station. Who covers those costs?
We do.
Okay, high-speed rail does. Okay.
The impacts that we have to, those are things that we would have to do.
Okay. So I know that you're.
If I can add, if you wanted to, I don't know, make it a bigger fire station and do something else if it's being relocated or changed in some way, obviously that could be a partnership opportunity as well. But that, we would replace it with what is there.
Okay, all right. And then, so I know that the location for your, the preferred location is on the east side.
Correct.
And so if you wouldn't mind bringing up that slide that had the other one that's got the
fanny pack.
Yeah, there you go. So, okay, so.
Sideways if it's.
You know what, there's another slide, I think it was a previous one, that showed.
So what else do I have? This one?
Yeah,
That's
this
super
one here.
fanny pack.
So this alternative A side, right? So, so the trains would have to go over to the west side, and then there'd be a bridge that would take the trains over.
So it depends which direction they're coming from. So if you're coming from the south, then you're usually on the on the east side. So on the east track, that's on the east. So then you just go straight in, right?
Mhm.
So if you're coming from San Francisco, you're coming down on the track that's on the west side, and so you have to have the train go up and over, up over the other rail, and then get back down to the maintenance facility site. So there would be a train flyover, basically in this. That's this part that you're seeing kind of bulb out. That's that flyover design.
Got it. And so the Geneva Avenue extension, so being able to provide an east-west corridor that currently doesn't exist very efficiently right now, what happens with the Geneva Avenue extension?
Well, we've been talking with Universal Paragon about that and other issues in terms of their development, and that we think that there are ways to create kind of supportive both land use and development that would allow for that extension to take place. I don't know if Bruce or James, you have anything more on Geneva that you want to add? Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure. You can negotiate that, but I'm just curious to know how you could physically, just based upon this flyover thing, Geneva Avenue extension is going to be 3 and 3 on the lanes.
It's 3 and 3 with an additional 2-lane reservation for BRT.
For BRT. Okay, so, based upon that configuration, that can go from one side of the Baylands all the way over to the other side? You feel confident that with your high-speed rail configuration, that could still occur?
Yeah.
Okay. And then...
Did you hear contrary to that?
Me?
Yeah.
In the meetings we've had, we have not discussed at all the Geneva Avenue extension.
So there's something with a cul-de-sac. What was that? No? Is there something that ended in a cul-de-sac that was in Geneva Avenue?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay.
All of that will require engineering work to design it, and so that's why we say that we have to talk to Universal Paragon about it, is because it's partially their engineering work and partially work with us as well.
Yeah, no, I understand. And the reason why I'm asking is, because you have Tunnel Avenue. You have this reconfiguration of tunnel, and that's just like two lanes.
Sure.
Right, and here you have the Geneva Avenue extension, which is 6 lanes plus 2 dedicated lanes, and we're sort of looking at 8 lanes. And you're saying that 8 lanes is okay to come through the middle of your flyover. So I'm
over?
It would be over or under. Again, this is why I say that engineering matters, and they would not be crossing tracks. It would be either above or below.
Yeah.
And okay.
Okay. So on that east side, as you know, we got quite a bit of dirt over there,
yeah.
right? And then, so we got this mountain of dirt, and then below that dirt is garbage.
Right.
So, first of all, I mean, you know, so if you guys take over the property, where's all the dirt gonna go?
So maybe I'll turn to James on kind of the, you know, the hauling of, or in the, what would happen in terms of grading and all of those things.
Right. Certainly, we recognize that there's a lot of remediation that has to happen here, but the dirt must be hauled off-site, and there are standards and regulations for how we handle this kinds of hazardous materials. So we'll do everything to comply with those California standards. Most likely, it's going to be off-site at a landfill, and then we'll have to cover it over.
Okay, so you will, so High Speed Rail then will be responsible for the Title 27 landfill closure?
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know if it's staff, I don't know if the developers in the room, but you know, what are we kind of looking at as a, you know, approximate estimate for Title 27 landfill? Like,
Vilkin looks like he's volunteering to answer that question, sir.
This is the person that would know.
Hi, Greg Vilkin, CEO of Universal Paragon. So we have been meeting with these nice people for the last few months and trying to be as cooperative as possible to give them all the information that they need to plan this. There are a couple of engineering challenges. So right now, in order to go over the catenary lines and have clearance for a bridge for Geneva to come over, we're already up to 52 feet and 55 feet at the top of rail. That's just coming over Caltrain. If we were to layer in high-speed rail, that puts us another, I think it's 35 feet above. So now either the rail's going to go up over 80 feet from where it is, so kind of over a 7-story building, or the road at Geneva comes up and goes up and comes over and comes back down. And when you have the minimum arcs that you have to do for Geneva to come over, it basically goes over the whole site and kind of touches down at the sides, because you can only go at a 5% ramp because it has to be handicap accessible. So there are some significant engineering challenges of being able to do the BRT and Geneva and high-speed rail over the top of Caltrain. And either way, you have to have the flyover, because you got to go, you have to get it south and north. So either plan, A or B, they have to create a flyover. So either plan significantly jeopardizes the Geneva extension.
So what about underneath? I mean, that seems precarious
so
also.
then the other challenge is, we haven't talked to them about this, of what their elevation is if it's on A, but right now that will go from about 37 feet elevation to about 65 today, and the trash is at about 25. Okay, so they could not go below 30 without actually moving the trash. And I don't even know if you could do that. I don't know one way or the other if you could relocate the dump. But the Title 27 has a minimum 5 feet on top of the MSD layer, so that puts them at about 30 feet. And so I just don't know, you know, in 3 dimensions, James, how that works, because we haven't looked at it and we haven't seen these drawings yet. So this is what we'll work with them to try and figure it out. We'd also talked about if it's on the alternative A side, you know, we're trying to then also fit in 25% open space in addition to this, in addition to what we're trying to do for development to comply with Measure JJ. And if you just do the math, you wipe out one whole side. It's 140 acres of open space plus their 110 acres. Okay, so that's, take one side or the other is basically gone. So it's just, it's trying to fit everything into a very small, it's not a small box, it's a big box, but there's a whole lot of uses for it. And the costs, we don't know yet of what the costs of Title 27 closure is.
Okay. No, fair enough. And, since you're up here, one of the slides, I think it was on page 26, that talked about, it says both alternatives potentially reduce available land for development. So what is your definition of potentially?
Seems like it's a given.
It happens.
I mean, yes, both either alternative reduces.
So that should be a will.
Yeah, well, yeah, well.
Word choice. I think there are continued opportunities that we've talked about in terms of, for example, that open space requirement. Could that be met on top of the facility? Is it on a deck of some kind? Maybe. I don't know. That's an open question. I think there's other open questions that will continue to need to be worked as we continue to advance.
Okay, and then with alternative A, so 93 acres and the 2 acres of the planned mixed-use area, but as the mayor was talking about, the fanny pack type of configuration, and I would think that there would, for the commercial space, you'd have to have at least a buffer on the outside too. I don't know, Greg. I mean, would you say that these numbers are conservative, or are they?
Well, here's the challenge. We have met with them. The way that the lines have to be configured for their operations make it so it has to be this kind of shape from what they've explained to us. And they don't have flexibility, because we had talked about saying, okay, take a lower section and just kind of come in and go like that.
Yeah.
But they've said that is too disruptive to their operations. So then we said, okay, if it's got to be this shape, then what if we covered it over? What if you went down lower, and instead of doing a flyover, you could do a cut under or something else? There are different engineering solutions that get them where they could go under and a park could run over the top of it. It's just, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's just money. Okay, you could do anything, but it's just how much does it cost the public to go do these things? We've also talked to them about no one is going to put a brand new, tech facility next to the railroad tracks if they're visible. And so what it does then is it really hurts the ability of the remainder of the development. And as we all know, we needed the 7 million feet of commercial to balance the costs of the residential to keep City of Brisbane in revenue neutral. So if we gut it and say, okay, well, we lose 3 or 4 million feet of commercial that's on the picket either side, and then how do we make up that cost, not to us, but for the operating costs for the City of Brisbane, because JJ says it has to be kept revenue neutral. In order to be kept revenue neutral, that's why the 7 million feet of tax base versus expenses that happen in commercial offset the 2,200 housing units, and the costs don't cover, housing doesn't pay for itself, commercial overpays for itself, and so that's why the balance.
So what are you going to do?
What are we going to do?
Yeah, I mean, like.
No, it's not. It isn't an our issue. It is if they condemn it, we don't have the right to stop them. Candidly, you don't have the right to stop them. They have condemnation authority. So they can condemn it and they can do what they choose to do. They just, according to condemnation law, and Tom can speak much more eloquently than I can about it, but they have to keep, I believe, you and us in a revenue neutral position. And so yours is different than ours. It's not just replacing the fire station. It's you don't have tax revenue to help offset the costs of having a mixed-use community.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to have Bruce Fukuji, who's our planning manager, talk a little bit about land use.
On us. The cost is not on us.
Good evening, Bruce Fukuji. I'm the planning manager for Northern California for high-speed rail. I think that with the announcement of the preferred alternative, it helps us as the authority to now be able to talk with Universal Paragon in more detail around what to do around looking at these land use issues. We're very sensitive to wanting to make sure that anything we do will be revenue neutral. For the city of Brisbane, we don't want to see an impact related to that. We're also very concerned about making sure that the amount of open space, the 25%, is met. And I think there's probably ways that we can look at the configuration of the east side of the maintenance facility, where through mitigation and other design elements, we can help provide space that would be usable for open space. And I also look at, because the general plan amendment It's just it's a designation for what the intentions are for the city. That there's a lot of ways of looking at how to configure density on the sites that can help make sure that you have the 7 million square feet of office space that can help meet that revenue neutral need. So we're looking forward working with the developer around opportunities for how to explore doing that.
If you use eminent domain, right, the developer, you're going to have to pay whatever the fair cost of the land, right? But the city of Brisbane doesn't get anything of that, correct? Right, and so then if there's a loss in revenue that would be generated from the site, that the city gets its portion, that then the city loses there too.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be some an economic analysis that will probably need to be done in terms of looking at what those impacts would be and how to approach doing that. But I think in terms of our intentions around how we want to work together with the city and with Universal Paragon is to look at, are there revenue neutral ways to being able to accommodate a maintenance facility.
Well, I will say if the way to accomplish the commercial is to go up, this town is going to flip out. I cannot see 7 million square feet of commercial in the air, which is the suggestion. I mean, when you're significantly less acreage to deal with and you want to build the same amount, the only option is to go up. So we're talking about a density that, I don't think has ever been contemplated by this council or the city. Certainly wasn't by our voters when they're voting for something like this. So that that would be a situation.
I think we've been having these conversations for I don't even know how long. This isn't news. When I was here a year ago when you guys were approving the final ER and putting the vote to the people to give you this exact public comment that we need to continue this conversation. I'm going to repeat that again. We've continued to advance for a year later. We at this stage where we don't, we at least think we know where we might be going. It's not a final decision at this stage. There's certainly more work to do, but at least we can focus on one or not the other. Mayor Pro Tem, you were asking me probably a year and a half ago, when are you going to make this decision? We moved it up 3 months in order to get to this point faster, partially so that there is a little bit of an easier way for us to start talking about continuing those conversations, that we're not flipping back and forth, which one of these are we going to look at. We think we know which one we're going to be looking at, and that's a step in the process. There's long ways to go from here to this being built, and there's long ways to go on the development being built. This is the time to be sorting through all these things.
So let's talk about that alternative A site. So the developer talked about the height of the fill that needs to go over the garbage, and so are you expecting that the current grade that exists for the current rail line to be the same grade as out on the east side for your rail yard?
James, I think that's an engineering question.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
So right now we have a current grade for the current line that's running through the site.
Mm-hmm.
Are you expecting your rail yard to be at that grade on the east side?
It's a little bit lower. There is some earthen material that we'd have to remove.
Well, we know that there's those piles of dirt, right? But when you look at all the renditions that I've seen of how you would remediate the site, we're talking about some really high heights. I've seen a photo or a rendition of Caltrain running through the site, and it's in a trough. But of course, your rail yard can't be higher than the current line. So I'm really, if you could just kind of explain like how you're going to deal with the remediation of the site and then making the site the same height as the current track grade.
Right. Our light maintenance facility has to be at the same grade as the Caltrain tracks where they are today. And so we have to have that in order to tie in from the south end.
And have you done any studies on that to evaluate that that is feasible?
Well, right now we're just evaluating the footprint. We haven't taken a look. We don't have any geotech information here to help us understand what exactly is in that.
Okay, so what you're saying is you're taking a guess. This is your best guess. We're going to do alternative A.
Right.
Right. We don't have any details, no studies. It's just this is our best guess. We're going to stick it out here. Okay, so then, you have the other alternative.
Right.
Right. Okay. So then you have the other alternative, alternative B. So say alternative A does not work. Then does alternative B your backup plan?
Well, yeah, there's no other sites being contemplated, correct? So it's going to be here.
So that would be the case. So if you couldn't deal with the geotechnical issues with remediating the site and the grades on the east side, then you're going to go to the west side.
We would revisit the question. I mean, that is the only other alternative we're studying. We're going to study both equally. We'll be doing lots of analysis of both sites. Right now, we're at the point of looking at the differentiators amongst them, and I've shared the ones that we're considering as in terms of this location. In the entire project section, we're recommending alternative A to the board as the going in preferred alternative. There's lots more work to do in the draft environmental documents, in response to comments, and from there, that we'll continue to analyze both at an equal level. So
okay, so and this is something I've brought to your attention every single time I see you, and that is why are we not evaluating the Gilroy high-speed rail yard as an alternative? I mean, I keep getting the same answer. Well, we need to be closer to the
answer.
Right. Well, but the thing is, right? Just give me a good reason.
So
why? No, give me a good reason for this question, and that is why can't we have a very early commuter train that's a high-speed rail train from Gilroy coming up the corridor to eventually get to San Francisco, so that then those trains could be ready for whatever travel that they head south. And you have Gilroy, who has no problem having the high-speed rail, but here we have a development that should be one of the shiny examples of sustainability for the area being completely torn apart from this this project that you're proposing. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? I mean, you have the state telling us, hey, we need to have housing, right? And they put tremendous pressure on us. And we worked with the state to make that happen, right? Our voters trusted us, to have local control. And now the state's coming in and just saying, no, we're just going to mess this thing up, and people are going to have to live near, a rail yard, right? Even though there are alternatives, but you're not willing to study. You've already just said, no, we're not going to do it. Why can't you do that analysis?
So those are not practical alternatives.
So then it's okay to spend the billions of dollars to make that happen, even though the train from San Jose to San Francisco would be the same speed as a regular Caltrain train? It just doesn't make sense.
Look, I understand that you've gotten lots of pressure from the state around housing. I get it. You guys were in the news a bunch, and that this is disruptive. I'm not unsympathetic to that, and my honest belief is that there are ways for win-win-win opportunities for the city, the developer, and us here. I think that it requires work on all of our parts, frankly, and we're willing to be part of that and want to be part of that. At the same time, we also have a mandate from the voters of California, and part of that mandate is to have a high-speed rail line from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And in order to be able to do that, we cannot have startup of service in Gilroy and be able to get trains to San Francisco during those rush hours to get that service.
Why can't some trains just stay at the Trans Bay Terminal? Why can't they just stay there? Why does it have to go to a rail yard? Why can't they just service the train?
Maintain trains, clean them, and store them. You cannot store the level of train. The reason that a facility is the size is you cannot store that many trains in Trans Bay Terminal.
Sure, you could have some trains there, and you could store some trains in Gilroy, and then bring some of those trains up when needed. I mean, if you're talking about like being creative, right? Then let's really be creative. Let's not just like, oh, you know what? This is it. This is the box we're working in, and we have to be creative inside the little box.
Look, there's creative, and then there's railroad engineering that is, we've been running railroads for 150 years. This is...
Well, you're telling me that you're the expert, and then when it comes to understanding the land, you don't even know. You're just taking the best guess. You don't even know if you could do it. So, I mean, again, maybe just put it in writing. We looked at this site at Gilroy, and we can't do it for these reasons here. Then you're on the record.
Because all the eggs are in the basket right here.
Yeah, you're just stuffing it here and saying, hey, we're going to give you two choices, A or B. Well, you know what? Those really aren't choices. This is you're just sticking it to us.
Cut off your right arm or cut off your left.
Yeah.
Okay, I know Karen wanted to say something, so I'm going to turn it over to her real quick.
I think it's probably a surprise to the people of Brisbane that you would come in and destroy the channel that they've worked very, very hard to clean up for many, many years. So not impressed with your answer about that, by the way. You better come up with something a little better than that one. Tell me about a light maintenance rail yard. Tell me about its operation. Tell me about the noise. Tell me when it runs and how it operates.
So I'll give a bit of a summary, and then I might turn to my colleagues for some additional assistance. But so light maintenance facility is intended to have a place to clean, store, maintain trains on a kind of day-to-day basis. So what you're going to see is in the startup of service in the morning, you're going to have crews there to get everything ready for the trains to go out for the day. They'll go up to San Francisco, run from there. Some trains will come back during the middle of the day for maintenance and upkeep in between kind of the peak service levels. And then at night there'll be maintenance activities going on in between the end of service and then the start of the next day.
What hours are you going to be doing this?
So the facility will operate 24 hours a day.
And you're going to do the majority of the maintenance between midnight and 5 a.m., would that be correct?
There would be various maintenance activities going on during the day and other ones going on at night.
Then you better go back and look at Gilroy.
A quick question about that. Can you explain the difference between a heavy maintenance facility and a light maintenance facility?
So a heavy maintenance facility, which we're planning for in the Central Valley, is where you do kind of the bigger levels of upkeep and maintenance. So there's various activities you have to do every day or every other day in order to maintain trains. There's other things that you might be doing every month or every 3 months, or even major overhauls that you're going to be doing every 5, 10, or 15 years. So all of those kind of bigger activities start to get you into the heavy maintenance facility and require additional equipment, additional things that we wouldn't have here. The light maintenance facilities are intended for ongoing running and storage and maintenance.
Okay. Do you want to say anything else?
I think I'm done.
Okay. Did you want to say anything else?
I did have a couple of questions, and they might be for UPC and in a combination with the high-speed rail. When we were talking about elevations, the current grade of the train tracks that are currently there are intending to remain at that level. And so what I'm hearing from UPC was that the garbage is 35 feet higher than the train track level currently?
When I'm saying those numbers, they're from sea level. So the train tracks, and Randy, help me if you know these numbers, are about 18 is the elevation, plus or minus. Yeah. So that's where the train track is, and that's about the same level as 101. The trash is higher than both of those. And then on top of that is the dirt. So if you look at that, the trash itself goes up to about 10 feet higher than either of those two baselines, which are both about 18. So the trash is about 25, so 7 feet higher is the trash. And then if you weren't to remove the trash, and I don't know what that would be, you'd have to then be another 5 feet is the minimum you can do to comply with Title 27 to close the landfill.
What
So that would be about 30 feet.
I appreciate that. From what I was hearing from the high-speed rail folks, they were saying that their maintenance facility really needs to be at the same grade as the current tracks. And so that would require the removal of material to below, enough below to be able to do
They would
the
have to remove
remediation.
trash.
They would have to remove trash to achieve that.
If they were to keep it on the east side.
If they were to keep it on the east side. But what I'm assuming the environmental study and the CEQA studies that are going to be required will do is look evenly at A and B, so both sides of the track.
Sure they will.
And on the B side, which is their less preferred at this point, those that, because it is an old rail yard, it is at the correct grade, and the remediation on that side of the site is remediation for the contaminants that normally come with a rail yard, the lead, arsenic, heavy metals, bunker sea oils, myriad of other chemicals, but things that they know how to remediate and are already at that ground or track level.
So wait, can I add on to that? Would you remediate then, or are you just gonna dump all those things back in through the operation of the? I mean,
We have to remediate, and that's part of what we would have to do, and that is in order to build the facility is remediate the ground that it would be on.
and so at a potential end of use, you would have to remediate again because would you have to remediate again because of the facility would contribute its own set of toxins, even though that it's in today's time. I imagine that a rail yard, even in today's time, would still contribute its own set of toxins, right?
So
you'd remediate, clean it
facilities are not like what came before.
Right.
Useful life of the facility is 100 years. We have, a long way to go for, the first part is building it.
but theoretically,
But
it would probably need to be remediated again, right?
I don't know what happens in
If a new rail yard is built, then that's what we're going to be dealing with in perpetuity, right?
So
you never
but my comment to high-speed rail on this is that when you weigh removing potentially 25 feet of garbage versus the other side, and you're going to weigh them with the equal amount of thought and process in the CEQA process, your decision on A or B may totally change once that report is published and the comment period and it gets reviewed. Is that correct? Since you're going to study both of them
We will be
equally.
studying them equally. We have enough to give the recommendation to our board of which one to go into the draft with as the preferred. But this is our environmental manager, Phyllis Potter.
I'm the environmental manager for this section. And I think.
What's your name?
Phyllis Potter.
Hi,
We've been
Phyllis.
through the environmental process, certainly a very intensive secret process that had several alternatives, such as, which is very, very common for NEPA, and it's the traditional NEPA process. What we have now are two alternatives that will be evaluated, and things can happen. Things do happen in this process. Once it goes public, and within the study, there's detailed analysis, there's hydrologic analysis, there's geotechnical analysis, there's a lot of dirt on both of these sites that would have to be removed for both sites. It's different dirt. One is from a rail yard, and one is from a
One includes
former
garbage,
landfill.
though.
Pardon me?
One includes garbage.
Yes.
A lot of it.
Yes, but I'm just saying there's a high quantities on both sides that would have to be moved because both sides would have reasons for that. In the environmental process, it's not unusual for changes to happen. You experienced it in your secret process with the various alternatives that were proposed and what eventually wound up with. It's an open process. There's a lot of negotiation. There's a lot of comment. So it's not a done deal.
Remind us when that's going to be, when you anticipate that the comment period will be over. What time frame again?
It's established now as a 45-day time period. And
From now.
Pardon me?
From now, or when
No,
do you anticipate the end of that?
It would be, well, the schedule now is to release the draft in March of 2020.
Okay.
And there'd be a 45-day review period during that cycle.
So May.
Public hearings, and then there's responses.
If I may,
Formal
Madam Mayor.
responses, as I'm sure you guys are well aware of and
If I
have
may.
experienced. But
Go ahead.
to think of this as an absolute done deal is really premature at this point in time. And I just wanted to articulate.
Could you?
Well, the site is a done
Considering
deal.
the funding that you're trying to get from the feds and the state, I would very much say that.
Well, when I'm, yes.
Could you please explain what you meant by negotiations? You just said there'll be a lot of negotiations going on. Could you explain that?
That's just a normal part of the process when there are permitting agencies that are involved, lots of them. There are jurisdictions that are involved. There's discussions that happen during the process that can cause some changes. It's an open public information process. And so and then there's various laws that apply to certain resources, and so that's what happens.
Okay.
So the environmental impact report, and we're all fairly familiar with them, is not a negotiation. It's information that gets digested and looked at and evaluated to see if it's true. That's what an environmental impact report is. And so if this is going to be released in March of 2020, one would assume that a lot of initial data has been drawn already and has come into your office to be compiled into the environmental impact report. And so you should know at this point what the levels should be, what the contaminants should be, or it's not going to be looking at the actual environmental impacts on the ground.
That is correct, and in the environmental document, and as part of the engineering process as well, hydrologic studies have been done, geotechnical studies have been done. That'll all be in the environmental impact statement, environmental impact report. Biological studies, transportation studies, air quality studies.
What if you find this is just not feasible financially?
I can't answer that question.
You can't or you won't.
That's not something I can really respond to.
Okay, great, thank you.
Do you want to respond to it?
I do, actually.
Okay. Okay, great.
Because in terms of figuring out what are feasible alternatives, one of the criteria that could make an alternative infeasible is that it is not financially feasible. Both of the alternatives are feasible from our perspective.
Okay, we have my city attorney is making a lunge towards the mic, so.
If the attorneys are lunging towards the mic, we're in trouble.
I don't think you needed me. Did I hear correctly that you haven't looked at the geotech? We have. But no, we were told that hadn't been looked at. So which is it? And what's the water table at?
I can speak precisely to the environmental document and what is in the environmental document. And there's a geotechnical study and a geotechnical analysis in the environmental document.
Of this site?
Of both sites.
Well, you just said,
I'm sorry.
just said you hadn't done that.
Yes.
We haven't added to the existing geotechnical information that's already out there, but we have collected through various other studies, the Brisbane Baylands report, the geotechnical studies that are in those other existing reports.
So you
But we
took-
have not done our own drilling.
No, that's our point. So what you did is you looked at an EIR that was developed for housing, and you're applying it to high-speed rail?
It's geotechnical information.
Oh, it's information. It's incomplete for your purposes, right?
Well, it gives us a basis to work from.
Okay, so what's the water table?
I don't have that information off the top of my head.
You don't have the information about what the water table is, where the dump is, where the landfill is?
No, I'm sorry, I don't have that number.
You can go look at pictures in the lobby, and what you can see is it's not very far down. How did you rule out, and this isn't for you, how did you rule out the Port of San Francisco? What I've heard here is that it's all incomplete.
The Port of San Francisco presents some challenges to getting to the site. We don't have a picture of it here, but to get to the site, we actually have from the Caltrain tracks. The I-280 is right above it. And so to get up and around the Caltrain tracks, we'd have to relocate the columns of I-280 to get around the infrastructure. And so that cost, that physical movement of the freeway makes that site infeasible.
To where you'd have to be on the port to put the trains?
That's correct.
Okay. And why did you rule out Gilroy?
Do you want to answer that?
I think we've talked about it, that if
No, we've gotten, with due respect,
Okay,
it's just not feasible. We'd like to know why. Why is it not feasible?
sure. I was trying to get to it. I apologize if I wasn't moving fast enough. But the main issue, if all of our trains were starting in San Jose, Gilroy's relatively close to that. When we're starting service in San Francisco, in order to get the trains that are needed for startup service to the location of where that service starts, which is in San Francisco, that distance is too great. You would have a congested corridor with AM Caltrain service, for example, in that corridor, that would not allow for sufficient trains to get to San Francisco in order to run from there.
And what meets high-speed rail? What speed actually qualifies for federal funding for high-speed rail?
So I'm not sure I understand the question. Generally, high-speed rail is defined as, or the authority that we have exclusive in the state is above 125 miles an hour. The system in the Central Valley will be running up to 220 miles an hour. That's the design of it.
What's
in the corridor
required under federal funding law to receive high-speed rail funding?
There is no requirement for federal funding for an operating speed.
And did we not, as a state, use federal money during the Obama administration to buy new rolling stock for Caltrain that's designated as high-speed rail rolling stock?
No, Caltrain has a grant, and we are in a project to electrify the system and buy new trains. We have contributed towards the electrification of that system. Caltrain is buying new trains. They are for Caltrain commuter service. They're not for high-speed operations.
No, answer the question I'm asking. Did we not, during the Obama administration, exactly where you're headed, but prior to that, when the money was being let, competitive let of funds went to the Midwest, went to the Northeast, came out West. That money came out of high-speed rail classification.
So we have two federal grants.
Right.
Those funds are being used for, or have been used and are being used for construction in the Central Valley and getting environmental clearance and on the rest of the Phase 1 system from San Francisco to Los Angeles.
So
those funds did not go to Caltrain.
So Caltrain's rolling stock was in the original solicitation to be replaced with that money. It's now not part of it?
So there are no federal high-speed rail funds going towards the replacement of Caltrain trains.
That's a recent decision. I'm asking a different
That's not
question.
a recent
I'm asking about
decision.
capability.
I mean, I'm not sure. I feel like we're going in circles, but there are different pots of funds. Caltrain has applied for a federal grant through the Core Capacity Program, which is to increase capacity on rail lines. We applied for federal funding from the High-Speed Intercity Passenger Rail Program and got funds towards building high-speed rail. Those are different pots of federal funds. They have different purposes. The Core Capacity funds have nothing to do with high-speed rail. High-speed rail funds have nothing to do with Caltrain in terms of federal funding.
But going back to the source of money, the federal money, the high-speed rail designation, the 125 miles an hour, is our imposition, correct?
Federal has different assignments of different levels of high-speed rail at various operating speeds. In California, the authority has exclusive rights for anything above 125 miles an hour.
Yes, the authority has exclusive rights. Here at 110 miles an hour, but less for the Caltrain. And I understand what you're saying. You're saying that the original pot of money was not used. Caltrain was separated out. the rolling stock that was originally part of the first term Obama administration isn't coming to Caltrain. I get your point. But back to the high-speed rail and the funding, what I'm trying to understand is if those trains are coming in at a cost of billions of dollars, and to Councilmember Lentz's point, the speed isn't any greater. I understand your point. You save 20 minutes, right, by having the high-speed rail go into San Francisco, the actual rolling stock, as opposed to have the Caltrain go in. Is part of the feasibility the billions of dollars that you're going to use to save the 20 minutes?
Prop 1A, which is our kind of key legislation with the voters
what the
passed
voters
to
authorized,
build
right?
a high-speed rail system in California. That was the will of the voters in 2008. That is what we're operating under. Said that the phase 1 of that system is defined as San Francisco to Los Angeles and Anaheim. If the voters had said that system is defined as San Jose to Los Angeles and Anaheim, we would be looking at a different system. In this quarter, we had first looked at dedicated, just high-speed rail tracks, not sharing the corridor with Caltrain. We have, since 2012, been looking at a blended system where the two services interline and provide service to San Francisco that way.
So discretion's being used. That's exactly, we're going round and round. So a decision was made to go to a blended system for practical reasons. And I guess the point that's being made from the dais, and it gets to spending 2 years plus with UPC planning, going to voter approval of development of a site, going through Sacramento, going through the entire process, and high-speed rail sitting silent.
We weren't sitting silent. We submitted comments at the draft stage. We submitted a letter at the final stage. I was here in person to provide comment to you. We were meeting with the city all along and talking about this. The fact that the city chose to move forward with a plan that didn't decide to accommodate it for it, that's where we are. That's the facts of the situation. And we're here to
You want to leave it with this. The city essentially went over your objection.
No,
that's your point?
No, our point is that to say that you were blindsided, you had no idea this was
I didn't say they were blindsided.
Okay, well, I must have misheard. I apologize.
What I said is there was practical silence. There was nothing about we're going to be 50, 60, 80, 36, whatever the number ends up being with flyover. How's UPC going to build housing there? Are we going to build the Salesforce Tower? Is that what we're going to do for commercial? We're just going to repeat it over here?
We have shared the designs as they were being developed and all the drawings with both UPC and the city for all along.
So we don't have an answer. So the answer on Gilroy is we can't park trains up here. There's not enough space because we need more space to get through into the 280 pillars for the freeway, block it. Gilroy's too far away. Okay, so we end up with 2, right?
Yeah.
But we end up with 2 that it doesn't matter how much money is involved. We've ruled out San Francisco because it's going to be too expensive. As we heard from UPC correctly, it's just money. We've ruled out Gilroy because it's too far away, meaning it's too expensive. But we're going to undo years of planning based on the notion that we think this is going to be cheaper, yet as we listen to the testimony, and that's the frustration you're hearing, well, we don't know. We haven't done the hydro.
We have, that'll be in the draft documents. So,
no, but you looked at, and I understand what you're saying. You did what's efficient. You looked at the hydro report for the EIR for the land that's there that was being looked at for a development, not for high-speed rail. Those are two entirely different things.
Is the dirt different?
The water table comes into play when you're talking about high-speed rail and what you have to do at grade versus putting houses up. Yeah, it's a big difference, huge difference. Okay, when you say you haven't done your own borings, that gets to what Ms. O'Connell was saying. The land's contaminated. Nobody's exactly sure what's in it because of a former rail site. It's been covered, etc. UPC's done borings. We know what's there. The city's got its own. We know what's there. There's going to be surprises. You guys haven't done your own. What you guys have done is you've looked at the EIR for housing and commercial purposes. Not the same as high-speed rail. Not even close. So what the city's saying is, before you say something's infeasible, step back and ask yourself, compared to what? You haven't really evaluated the land. You've seen an open swath of land. You've said, that seems to work. We'll figure it out. We understand why. Just admit that there are factors that could come into play that make it so expensive and so risky that we, high-speed rail, will be just like everybody else in this room saying, and if they come into play, we'll second guess, we'll pause. We're not going to negotiate our way out of it. We're going to try to fix it. And that's what nobody's hearing. What we're hearing is foreclosed, we can do this.
No, there's lots of additional information that we're going to be receiving. I'm sure that we'll be receiving a comment letter from the city that you will be giving us additional insight as well. I'm sure others will also, and I am certain that we'll be continuing to do those studies and look. We're a long way from this being in construction. There's lots of work in front of us. We're at the stage in the process where we're trying to get to the draft environmental document. That's not even that is not a final decision. That gets, there's more to come after that. We're a step in the process, and so fair enough, you want more information. Some of that is coming towards you, but we need the time to get that work done and get that out.
But you've ruled other things out. That's our point. Don't rule them out. Thank you.
I know Karen wants to say something really quickly.
Yeah, I've actually got a really good idea. I mean, you're saying bringing the trains from Gilroy to San Francisco to start service in San Francisco early in the morning. Why don't you just start the trains out of Gilroy and bring them up here and have a Gilroy to San Francisco train come up in the morning? The things that you gentlemen and ladies have said today are not making sense to me at all. Your gaps in your answers, you're not answering the questions our attorney has asked, all the questions that Cliff has asked you. It's completely inadequate. If the people from UPC had answered us in the same way at the meeting we had here on Monday night, they would have been laughed out of here. I'm sorry, you need to go do some homework because you have not done your work.
To follow up, I think that, considering the amount of remediation that needs to be done on either of the sites and all of the other challenges that have been discussed tonight, it seems like moving around some pillars would be probably a much less daunting effort, probably a much less expensive effort. But then again, San Francisco, right? San Francisco doesn't want it, so we're gonna pick on Brisbane, the little one that has all this open land, because that's the easiest thing to do. So we highly object. I'm pretty sure we're going to be discussing this for many, many, many more months until we're all blue in the face. I'd actually like to hear from Greg really quickly if he has a preferred alternative.
Well, it's between A and B. We think that B, which is the west side of the tracks, is completely infeasible because there's no way to do housing immediately adjacent to the railroad tracks that would then come through and be operating all night long. They're a 24-hour facility, so I can't imagine anyone wanting to live near that, hear that, or be that. So I just think that the west side kills the rest of the development, and that kills all the housing. So now it's a question of the housing or the trains. On the east side, it is a series of technical challenges, and again, it's just money. But they could relocate and dig up the MSD, and they could dig up and relocate the trash. I mean, you could do that. They can get down to the level that they need. It just means that they are in the trash, and I have no idea what that entails. That's a Cal Recycle thing, and they've got to work with Cal Recycle that you now opened up a dump to the air again, and it's been closed since 1967, so who knows what the methane and the decontamination, the decomposition has happened. So,
which is so much more feasible than putting it, figuring out the challenge with 280, right?
So I have one comment on that, just to interrupt because it's fresh in my mind. Here is the property owner who has done an EIR that was a high-level EIR, not one that's for any development. It would need to be refined, and there's a lot of data gaps. he doesn't know what's down there. I don't know how your environmental impact people are going to know what to put in their report when the current property owners that has access to all that data doesn't know what's there either.
We were here
And
Monday
they
night.
expect to have it in 30 days or 60 days to
Well,
do
we
a
don't-
draft environmental. I think it's being a little.
Yeah, no, just to be clear, when we were here Monday night for the environmental review, we said we don't know what's down there and we aren't going to have a plan for another, call it till fall of a data gap on the east side. So we don't know what's there. So it wasn't covered in our EIR. So if you guys were looking at our EIR as to giving you information, it's incomplete for your use and our use, which is why we now have to go do the analysis.
Right. It would be irresponsible to make assumptions about what is there and how much that costs to deal with. Okay. Did you want to say anything else? No. Sorry. So I do.
More at this point.
Okay. So I do have a number of slips. However, I would like to suggest the council take 5 minutes to use the restroom. And does any other member of the council object to that?
No.
Okay, so we will adjourn into a 5-minute break.
Don't I have a say?
We think that it's for the best.
Best for who?
Well,
It's best for all of us. Tell me how you getting separated is best for me.
we'll all be happier in the long run.
If you can talk to your kids about this, you can talk to them about drugs. Visit our website at drugfree.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America.
This is Foreign Languages Made Easy, Speaking and Understanding Teenager.
Phrase 1.
There were stacks of heads chiseling in the heezy.
Translation.
There were many people relaxing in the house.
Phrase 2.
His whip is a janky hoopty.
Translation.
His automobile is less than desirable.
You may not understand your kids, but your kids understand you. Talk to them about drugs. Need help? Get help. Visit our website at drugfree.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America.
If you think it's hard living with the noise, imagine having to live with the silence. 1 in 5 kids will sniff household products to get high. Inhalant abuse can kill them, even the first time. So start making some noise of your own. Talk to your kids today. Visit drugfree.org/inhalants. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America.
tart. They're so sweet. Attorney to rejoin us, so I'm not going to start without him.
Let's go.
Okay, we will now reconvene the city council meeting. Considering the lateness of the hour and that we still have a presentation from Caltrain and quite a lengthy agenda that we must get through completely tonight, the standard is 5 minutes. However, we are asking if you can be as brief as possible. As a courtesy to the council and the other speakers, that would be greatly appreciated. My first slip on this matter is Roland LeBrun.
So I have a presentation for you.
Okay.
But before I get into my presentation, I'd like the attorney to make a couple of notes about specific government code, especially Prop 1A. Section 2704.04 Streets and Highways Code establishes that the terminal for the system is a Transbay terminal, not the Fulton King Rail Yard. And Section 2704.09 establishes a maximum travel time for non-stop trains between San Jose and San Francisco of 30 minutes, not 40. And I think the thing that's most relevant to you is California Public Utilities Code, Section 185032, which establishes High-Speed Rail's Authority exclusive rights to design, maintain, and develop lines in excess of 125 miles an hour. Subsection B says that if the line is less than 125, anybody can do it. So that's Caltrain or anybody else. So in other words, another entity could be doing the environmental clearance between San Francisco and Gilroy and would be perfectly adequate. So here's my presentation, which is going to bring some, shall I say, bring expectations down to what it should really be. So the three things I want to touch on is why are we going to do 100 acres instead of 8, and this is what a light maintenance facility should be taking. And I'm going to be alter location in Brisbane, discuss potential positive, negative impacts, and then talk about Auckland, which is really where this should be going, but we need Transbay Tube. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is London, and the reason I give you this particular chart is that you can see the actual tracks. So you can see a high maintenance facility, a heavy maintenance facility for Eurostar, which is London and Paris trains. Actually, all the maintenance takes place in London. Right next to it is the light maintenance facility, which is 8 acres, only got 3 tracks. Next slide, please. So if you look this up on Google, you can see it, and if you actually can see this blue line to the right, that's actually a Eurostar train currently being serviced in the light maintenance facility. The heavy maintenance facility is enormous. It actually it's got 8 bays for 8 trains. Next slide, please. So this is what I put in the EIR for the Baylands. My proposal was, if you look at these white tracks, the red tracks are Caltrain. And my proposal was to increase the speed, is to have the curve closer to Ice House Hill and follow the alignment of 5th Street before diving back into the tunnel. And next slide please, what allows you to do is to move the light maintenance facility between Ice House Hill and the tank farm. And I've got the complete track work, fully developed, ready to go. It takes my time up? Okay. And I'd be happy to sit down with
No, you have more time.
Oh, okay. I'm happy to sit down with your staff and give them the complete track work and everything, with the switches and everything. The way we get across to that with something called a slide under that was mentioned earlier. But I have another presentation after Caltrain, which is going to be discussing a brand new station, how interfaces with Geneva and everything else, and I'll explain to you how the track works and how you can get to the maintenance facility and actually build the entire thing without impacting Caltrain operations in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Kim, it's your turn. You want to come now?
Hello, Honorable Mayor, City Council. My name is Kim Folene. I'm a Brisbane resident. I'm speaking regarding the high-speed rail plan to have a light maintenance facility located in the Baylands. I hope the City Council will not waste any more time trying to negotiate with the High-Speed Rail Authority and instead consult with our City Attorney and lobby our state representatives and Senator Scott Wiener to stop this. The City negotiated with the state to retain local control over the Baylands development in exchange for changing our general plan to allow for 1,800 to 2,200 housing units to address the Bay Area housing crisis. The city made good on its part of the negotiation with Measure JJ, and now the state needs to honor their part and allow Brisbane to retain control. If the state doesn't honor this, they'll have no credibility in future negotiations with other Bay Area cities to create much-needed housing. I would also urge the council to start on the Baylands Development Agreement now, if possible. This is the city's best protection against HSR's plan. I would also add that the reduction of land available for commercial and mixed use per HSR's proposal will most definitely impact the housing component of the Baylands development. And housing is what the state wants on the Baylands. Governor Newsom has also made it clear that housing is the highest need in the Bay Area. And finally, Brisbane has borne far more of its share of dirty industries and garbage for the benefit of San Francisco. The Baylands and Sierra Point were the dumping grounds for San Francisco's garbage. Recology, San Francisco's garbage service today, continues to operate in Brisbane and will be expanding further into Brisbane. We also have the Kinder Morgan tank farm providing gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel to San Francisco and other peninsula cities. Now San Francisco wants to dump its train maintenance facility in Brisbane. They will enjoy all the benefits of high-speed rail, and we will get all the negative impacts, such as a loss in tax revenue. We won't even get a train stop. The facility should be located in San Francisco. They are much better able to absorb a loss like this in tax revenue than Brisbane. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Up next, Michael Barnes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Michael Barnes. I'm a Brisbane resident. It is absurd that San Francisco's non-existent marine eco-industrial center that is expected to include self-storage, auto storage, and construction material recycling would be valued more than Brisbane's effort to remediate the Baylands and put the land to productive use, including housing. We have accepted garbage from San Francisco for well over a century. Most recently, we accepted Warriors Arena dirt on top of the former San Francisco garbage dump. We have impacts of airport noise and exhaust from the San Francisco International Airport that don't affect San Francisco. We have for years received the impacts of supporting our regional neighbor. It is only fair that San Francisco accept the impact of a railroad yard instead of the impact also being dumped on Brisbane. Given the outrageous cost overruns of high-speed rail, it is petty to use the cost of a rail yard as justification to locate a rail yard in Brisbane instead of San Francisco. You are wasting your time haggling with the High-Speed Rail Authority. They are not responsive. They are an unelected body of bureaucrats who answer only to the state. I urge the Council to oppose a Brisbane high-speed rail yard in Sacramento and look for allies on the peninsula, the community working groups, and Gilroy to insist that the rail yard be located on San Francisco property, since San Francisco will be enjoying the high-speed rail service. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Up next, Anna Dilworth.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the high-speed rail for giving us an overview of what to expect, but I'm really concerned that of the meetings that are happening, that none are being held here. That I got the list of the 4 meetings that are happening, and I get to choose Redwood City or any other place but Brisbane. I think that they should make a presentation here in Brisbane, and that the residents of Daly City and San Francisco all be invited like we did for the Brisbane Baylands Community Advisory Group. This isn't just us, and it's not just people down the peninsula. It is something where all communities need to meet, and they need to meet here where it's going to happen. Part of an EIR process is having some sense of community approval, and I kind of get that, and pun intended, we are being railroaded here. I am very concerned that when they claim they've met with the stakeholders and they're meeting with BCDC, that the community of Brisbane Baylands Community Advisory Group has not been invited in to be a stakeholder. Regarding the choices of A or B, I'm probably the only person in this audience that thinks that a rail yard is a use of this rail yard should only be for rail services, because that was the original filling of the bay. The public trust was allowed the filling of the bay for the purposes of transportation. And in my opinion, that should be the only thing, no housing. But I've expressed that opinion. It's beyond the ability for that to be of any use to anybody. But because of the experience I've had on the Brisbane Baylands, I would really recommend that you look at the documents. And there was one in particular that Barbara Ebel had made available that Universal Paragon had paid for by somebody going out and testing the gas, what is off-gassing, not through the system that's supposed to take the gases off. And those numbers were astronomical. And when we were dealing with the mitigation of the spills out at Kinder Morgan, I objected to them choosing not to do any mitigation. It was going to be a passive attenuation, natural attenuation. But what they said was that the reason that they weren't going to clean up to a higher level at Kinder Morgan is because that's an industrial use, that's an industrial level, and you expect that kind of gas to be in that environment. I can imagine that the exact same excuse will be given for the rail yard. They won't clean up to a higher standard, and that the presence of the toxins out there are perfectly fine, because that's to be expected in this environment. So I think we have had really going to get a raw end of the deal in terms of environmental consideration. And particularly, I'm incensed about the comments about the wetlands, that we'll just take this little thing and underground it. That is absolutely unacceptable, that we have an environment out there that has a chance of, in fact, I would love for them to go down to the lower level so that we could introduce more wetlands than this little linear design that comes out of Universal Paragon. But I thank you for your time, and ask that we get a real meeting here in this town, not just an update. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Nancy Loxamana.
Nancy Loxamana, resident Brisbane. I'm very upset by this presentation and this possibility of what can happen to our town. We've spent 10, 15 years studying EIRs, trying to do the best thing for our town, working very hard with the state, and to have another agency come in here and railroad us into something that will be a 24-hour maintenance facility that can be done on 8 acres and not 100 acres, screw up everything that we've worked very, very hard to do, and think that it will just be okay and either be an A or a B, and not really present something like Gilroy or Oakland to be what it should be. I'm curious where the Los Angeles light maintenance facility is. Is it in Los Angeles, or is it outside of Los Angeles? Technically, we're on the border, so I'd love to know where that is. Our whole plan with JJ, we had a 77% participation rate. It divided us, but actually made us stronger. The meeting we had Monday night was beautiful. I mean, the big issues on Monday night was about the air quality and whether we can have a fig tree grow. I mean, we've gone so far as a community. And if we can, like Dana said, have the meeting here where there is going to be the most objection to this project would be the important thing to do next. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Deborah Horn.
Hi, Mayor and council members, Deb Horn. Gosh, that's the first time I could completely agree with Kim. I actually completely agree with everything everybody said, including how important it is, and I'll address this to the high-speed rail folks, to have the meeting in Brisbane. That just totally makes sense. So I don't have a speech. I just have my biggest worry, which is, quote unquote, from the project manager here, that Measure JJ was just a designation of our intentions so that they could run over it, railroad it. The state can, all of the work we did, the state can impose something new. It's upsetting at this point, but I think it's a fact, and I've seen eminent domain work. We could spend a lot of time fighting this. I've seen it work, and we may not be able to fight it. So what I'm wondering is, we're on this accelerated timeline to get everything planned. The state imposed us, changing our general plan. Now the state is trying to impose something else. The timelines are so out of kilter. Is it possible to go to our state legislators? And is it possible to get a little more time? Is it possible to say, if you're throwing all the cards up in the air, what does that look like? I believe we should go to the state legislators, because it's the state now with opposing interests on the little town of Brisbane, because we don't have a lot of people, we don't have a lot of money. Mostly poor people live around visitation in the area that are impacted by the pollutants. We're not a rich town. So I just think all the cards are up in the air again. And anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, moving on. We're going to go to item D under presentations, Caltrain business plan update.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Sebastian Petty. I'm a Director of Policy Development with Caltrain, and I'm here to provide you a brief update on the Caltrain business plan. So an overview of what is the business plan, what are we doing in this effort? It's really a long-range plan for the future of the Caltrain service and the Caltrain corridor. So this is not an engineering exercise, it's not a project, it's really a long-range plan as we look out to 2040 and think about what the future of the corridor will be and how Caltrain service may evolve. It's covering a lot of different areas. A lot of the work we've done so far is focused on service planning, so thinking about, once we're electrified, the number of trains that may run in the corridor, how those trains could stop or interact with each other, how they'll work around high-speed rail. We're looking at sort of a business case evaluation to think about different ways that we evaluate different service choices. We are spending a lot of time on what we think of as the community interface. Caltrain runs through 21 different local jurisdictions. There are a lot of good things we think that Caltrain does for those jurisdictions, but clearly there are a lot of impacts that are associated with rail and rail facilities and the changing of rail facilities. And so for us, it's important to begin that process of thinking about those at a very early stage of the planning. And then finally, we're looking at our own organization and thinking about how sort of the governance and structure of Caltrain may need to change in the future. Just briefly, it's a fairly long planning process. We are coming up to a pretty big decision point with our board, and that's one of the reasons that I'm here speaking with you this evening. We've done a variety of work, which I'll cover at a very high level tonight, and what we'll be asking our board to consider in August and then potentially take action on later in the fall would be adopting really a long-range vision for the system. So kind of setting out a vision for how we may grow and change in the future. And that vision really is a plan for growth. I think, as the council may be aware, we're in the process of electrifying, so we've already kind of committed to change. It's coming at some point in the future. We'll share the corridor with high-speed rail, so we do know that we're growing. It's really a question of how will we grow, how much will we grow, what will that growth look like? And one of the reasons we're asking ourselves that question is that we're a changing corridor, and we're changing both on the land use side. We see a tremendous amount of growth projected in the future up and down the corridor. A lot of it's in San Francisco, a lot's in San Jose, but a lot of it is everywhere in between. And we also know that we'll be a more connected corridor in the future. There are major transportation investments all up and down the corridor. And so when we think out about the next 20 or so years, we're really looking at an environment that's very different. And so based on that, we've been doing a lot of work over the last years to really look at basically three different options for growth, a baseline and what we're calling a moderate and a high growth. And I won't dwell on these in detail. You saw this slide in the last projection. So our baseline scenario is consistent with what High-Speed Rail is looking at in their environmental document. That's broadly consistent with what Caltrain and the authority have been talking about for the last number of years. This stage, we're really just looking at the service. So this would be 6 Caltrain trains per hour operating in a skip-stop pattern with high-speed rail.
Can you just identify the Bayshore? You only have one stop or 2 trains?
Yes, that's correct. In this scenario where we have 6 Caltrains per hour per direction on the corridor, the prototypical schedule we've been working with, and it's very important to say with all of these, is these are illustrative schedules, so they're not definitive. They are a reasonable example of how the service could be operated. Would have half-hourly service at Bayshore. We've then looked at a moderate growth scenario that looks at sort of layering on some additional Caltrain service. So what would it take to get up to a total of 12 trains per hour per direction in the corridor, 8 Caltrain trains, and the same 4 high-speed rail trains. The high-speed rail trains are the same throughout all of these. That service would be really configured as more of a local and an express system. And so in this case, and I have a few slides that talk specifically about Brisbane at the end and the Bayshore station, so I'll just kind of skip through to those. And then finally, we looked at an option that really kind of maxes out the existing corridor. This is about as much as we could grow within the corridor. We've done a lot of ridership modeling based on just the land use growth in the corridor. We do see a lot of increased demand. As our service grows, the demand increases further, and so we think that by 2040, as compared to the 60,000 people a day we carry now, we could be up to anywhere over 160,000 to 200,000 in the future. That's the equivalent of anywhere between adding 4 and 8.5 lanes of regional freeway capacity in terms of the number of people we'd be carrying.
Wow.
So as I mentioned, our board is preparing to choose a vision. We're working very hard right now to put together a whole bunch of analysis of these different options that look at costs, benefits, really a whole framework to think about what kind of a long-range vision for Caltrain makes sense. And that's what we'll be presenting to our board in August and discussing with stakeholders subsequently. I did mention we are doing a lot of discussion around the corridor community interface. Brisbane is fortunate, I think, that there are no active at-grade crossings in the city. That's a huge issue in other parts of the Caltrain corridor, and a lot of the work we've been doing in the plan has been very focused on that. But clearly, as we've heard tonight, there are a lot of other potential impacts that can be associated with rail facilities, and it's an important area for us to really be thinking about as we think about how the system grows and evolves. So to focus specifically on Brisbane, within all of the scenarios we're looking at, there's no new passing track infrastructure contemplated here. Similarly, pardon? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought.
I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. There is a potential as Caltrain grows to need to look at areas for storage, additional storage at the north end of the system. And at this point, we know as we grow our system, eventually that is something we may need to deal with. We certainly haven't made any sort of conclusions about where that storage could occur. Some of it may depend on how the conversation evolves around a high-speed rail facility here. There are generally other sites we could look at as well. In terms of the kind of scale of facility we might need in, say, the highest growth scenario, we're not talking about a 100-acre kind of facility. It's a smaller scale. But there is a reality that as our system grows, we do need to think about where trains go.
It was mentioned the other day, Cliff and I had a big transit meeting with multiple different agencies represented, and the figure was thrown out around 10 acres, more or less.
That's generally I think there's a lot of, again, this is a very high level plan, even though it gets into a good amount of detail, so there'd be a lot of fleet planning we'd need to do to really lock in, but that's roughly the order of magnitude that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just add a little bit more to that, it was, yeah, I think about 10 to 20 acres, and that it wasn't that you were going to add to your existing rail yard footprint, but that you were going to reduce the Fourth and King rail yard, so that then you could take that reduction from that mixed use project and then put it into the Brisbane Baylands mixed use project. I think that's what Michelle was saying.
I think Michelle may have been a little bit overly specific there in the sense that there's a few different dynamics.
I'm using that
I don't know.
now on.
That's, I mean,
well, no, she may well have said that, and I think so. To just be very clear about it, here's the dynamic that's going on. So there are really two potential things in play. One is the size of our fleet expanding as we electrify, and especially if we're talking about a higher growth scenario. We're talking in aggregate about a lot more trains, and so there are inherent limitations on the Fourth and King site. There is also a reality that there is a development interest at the Fourth and King site, and San Francisco is developing that site. Caltrain hasn't committed to doing anything yet, but there's a reality that San Francisco is part of our governing board. They've expressed that desire very strongly, and so it's something we have to look at. Part of that conversation is talking about where trains can get stored, and that conversation can be one that looks at Brisbane, especially if there is an active discussion around rail storage here. It could also look at other parts of San Francisco, and we'll do both of those.
Yeah. So I have a question for staff. Did Caltrain ever mention that to any of you prior to that meeting a couple days ago?
Well, we've there's been a study out of San Francisco Planning Department that goes back many years about a relocation of the Caltrain maintenance yard at Fourth and King. In terms of what we heard the other day, I think that was the first time I heard it articulated that way from Caltrain itself.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're talking about communication, I mean, we would hope that you would inform our staff of any potential relocation of a rail yard to our city. I mean, I think that's only fair. I mean, it shouldn't just happen, hey, out of the blue, by the way, we're thinking about doing this.
So I certainly apologize if there was a miscommunication there. We have met with your staff multiple times. They were at various points in the process, and so if that piece of information was not fully conveyed, then
yeah, I mean, we've heard for a long time, San Francisco wanting to just move the entire Fourth and King rail yard to Brisbane, right? I mean, because as the mayor said, sometimes San Francisco thinks that we're just the dumping ground. So, but Caltrain has always been, a champion of making sure that a city does not try and dominate another city, right? You don't take, a nuisance and give it to somebody else. So I hope that as you're doing your planning, that you don't do that and you abide by that, I think, common agreement that all of the cities within the JPA have abided by for decades. Thank you.
So just to follow up on that, isn't the current rail yard no longer owned by the JPA and it's owned by Prologis? Yeah,
the current rail yard has actually never been owned by the JPA. When the rail yard was taken over from Southern Pacific, that was one of the properties they spun off to Catellus and then subsequently to Prologis.
So wouldn't it make sense from a business plan model when you're developing this, that if tracks are going to be made on a shared line that's using high-speed rail potentially, to also want to facilitate Caltrain storage and maintenance at the same facility?
Potentially.
Okay, thank you.
I think, just again to clarify, there's, I think we're giving you information very early in this process in advance of any sort of decisions being made, including the sizing of a facility, including the location of the facility, including whether there is ultimately a need for a facility.
I felt that I gathered that sentiment from our meeting the other day, that there was definitely somewhat of a premature conversation. So I would say
that I would characterize it as it's not a premature conversation. I think now is the time to have some of that conversation and be open that there is an issue, and it may manifest at some point in a study that could manifest into a plan, into a project. We're a long way away from that.
right. A lot of the specifics obviously haven't
Okay.
been really
All right.
ironed out.
So you say that you're a long ways away from that, like 3 or 4 years from.
I think the next step after this plan, really regardless of the particular vision that's adopted and as the business plan advances into a plan, would be to really look at what are the key sort of subsequent types of projects that would need to be done in the overall life of Caltrain, and to what extent do those include a variety of changes to the north end of the terminal, whether it's the downtown extension, whether it's anything changing at the yards, whether it's the city's ambitions to have a tunnel under Penn Avenue. How does that relate to what's happening in Brisbane, what's happening elsewhere in San Francisco, and what are the options there? It's not to jump into a project or do an EIR, it's to do further focused planning on the north end of the system.
All right. Do you have more slides for Brisbane?
Just some ridership projections. So looking at just sort of changes in the number of stops that might be at the Bayshore Station in these different scenarios, stops for peak hour direction, and again, ridership projection changes. So looking at going from a relatively low ridership station today that gets relatively low levels of service to one that is seeing a lot of increased usage and service in the future.
But
yeah.
Isn't it on the Bayshore Station, no matter, well, from what it looks like on the projections that we've seen so far in the local policymakers group, is that it's always going to be a skip stop station where we're not going to have direct train service in most likelihoods?
No, that's not correct. So it's been so the skip stop pattern is the baseline pattern. In both the moderate and the high growth, what we're looking at is a combination of local and express services. And so Bayshore, we've generally shown as being on the local pattern. So you would be part of a local train. We have not shown the station as getting express service. Again, these are illustrative plans. We're not going to ask our board to adopt a schedule for 20 years in the future. Really what we're trying to show is, in aggregate across the system, what could we do on the corridor, and what's the general sort of magnitude of infrastructure that would be required to do that.
Okay, so say, Brisbane UPC, we move forward with the specific plan, the development agreement, in the next, 2 or so years. We start to, see development out at the site, maybe within the next 5 years or so, who knows? But, it could be relatively soon.
Sure.
And so, I mean, when you look at between Brisbane and San Francisco at the Baylands, the minimum's going to be 3,500, or so houses, potentially up to 7 million square feet. San Francisco is going to be building 7,000 units at Candlestick Point, Executive Park. Plus, if they get their act together with, the Bayshore area. Hunters Point area. Considerably a lot more units. Another 5,000-6,000 units. Cow Palace might have 3,000 to 4,000 units. And so we're talking about a lot of growth.
Mm-hmm.
So, it just. Obviously you're gonna need more stops. So as the growth, comes on board, then those the amount of stops increases. That's flexible. You're anticipating this additional growth because you're looking at 2040. I mean, by 2040, we could have a lot of this already built.
So I think we're doing this plan to anticipate the growth, and so there's part of the story that isn't a great story, and what that is there are limits to how flexible railroads can be, and so one of the reasons we're doing this plan is because cities like Brisbane, all up and down the corridor, are planning for growth, and they're counting on the train to be there, and I think it's my job to show a realistic picture of what the railroad can do and what kind of infrastructure will be required to do that.
So one of the things that, we've been talking about, as you know, the Bayshore station is really a stop. It's not a real station. It could be demoed in less than a week. So, if we were to get all the transit agencies together, right, San Mateo County, TA, San Francisco, TA, the mayor's office, MTC, working with the city and the developer, you could have a multimodal station where all those modes come together in one place. But, it takes that willingness to work together and to, go outside of some of these just kind of in the box, expectations. Right, and so if we're looking at potentially building a multimodal station, you'd want to be able to have very efficient service. I mean, you wouldn't build a multimodal station if you're only going to, stop, how you have it right here every hour or whatever.
So that would be a service every 15 minutes in both directions.
Okay, so this would be okay. Well, then if that's the case, then it would be good. So in regards to the station.
Mm-hmm.
Have the folks at Caltrain discussed the potential of connecting the BRT with the train station? Right now, they would be separate.
Yeah, I think we're very aware that station planning is going on, and it has been going on for some time, and there's been some back and forth on the movement of the station and some of the details there, and I think we'd be excited to re-engage as the Baylands development moves forward.
Okay. Do you just personally, do you think that the BRT and the Caltrain station should be together so that it makes it easy to get off the bus, get on the train, or off the train, get on the bus?
So I'll admit I'm not familiar in detail with the specifics of the site, so I'm going to not comment on the particulars just because I don't know. I really don't know the details of the circumstances. In general, however, what I can say is that our vision is for a system that'll triple its ridership, and it's certainly not our vision that all those people will drive and park at the station. So ensuring that our stations have high quality intermodal connections is a core focus for us.
Okay, great, thank you.
Can I just interject one really quick thing? Every community on the Caltrain line in our meetings is looking to have connections to trains and intermodal connections and figure out how they can merge those systems. Every community that wants great service is going to be at the loss, not possibly, of another community not having great service. And so there is some jockeying going to be going on who's going to get that service. So it's just a reality that there's only going to be so many trains on the line, and communities that can have, like the Dunbarton interface, possibly with a private train, and putting private trains on the track, could take from other services and could integrate better. So
yeah,
it's all been a discussion.
You would hope that it'd be data driven, right? And that
everybody's got growth plans at every Caltrain station.
Yeah.
Whole line. So it's going to be an interesting dilemma on who's going to get that service and who's not.
For sure. Well, thank goodness that we are electrifying the system, right? So that we can add the trains, increase efficiency on the track. So.
Do you have additional slides beyond this?
Let's find out. I think just, again, covering that one of the major milestones that's coming up is a recommendation to our board around which one of these sort of programs we should be looking at as a long-range vision. Again, just presenting it informationally in August, doing a bunch of outreach over the next couple of months, and then asking them to take action. 2040 is a long way away, and so really this isn't the end of the business planning process. What we'll be looking at over the rest of the year is how we sort of bridge the distance between where we'll be when we're electrified in 2022 and 2040. And as I mentioned, this isn't a project, it's sort of a plan for growth. And so really thinking about the incremental steps we can take along the way to realize that growth.
All right. And then, Madison, I think Greg, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had a question. Can we recognize? Thank you. One of the things is just that is frustrating for me spending this last week with all the different transit agencies is that everybody's in their own lane going forward. And so we have a $500 million plan to put in a BRT to create a multimodal station to a station that is only going to get 2 trains an hour. Doesn't make any sense. Why would we spend the $500 million to connect all of the jobs and housing that is coming from Candlestick and Hunters Point, which is all coming to the Bayshore Station, only to then have it be a local only and a bypass station? The reason you don't need to add any lines is we already have 4 lines. And so it is a very low-cost station for Caltrain. And so it is frustrating to me to look at it and say, we've met with 2 of your other groups at Caltrain. They know what our plan is, but it isn't anywhere reflected in what your forward planning is. And so I'm trying to figure out how we get the pieces to all talk together so that if we are doing regional planning for transportation, it can actually be a regional plan.
Thanks.
If I may just respond to that, because it echoes some of the comments that the Mayor Pro Tem made, and it is important for me to say this. Brisbane is growing, your neighbors are growing as well. There is a tremendous amount of growth up and down the Caltrain corridor. By 2040, just looking at the regional projections, there will be a 40% increase in the number of humans who live and work near Caltrain stations. The unfortunate, I think, message that I need to bear as part of that is that there's a supply side problem. There is only so much the railroad can do. And we can look at additional investments in the railroad that'll increase capacity and allow us to provide more throughput. But at the end of the day, there are limits to what the railroads can do. And so I guess I want to make it very clear that the Baylands plans and the land use associated with them are incorporated in the land use projections we're looking at to do this demand forecasting. So we see what you're doing, we see what you're planning. There's a reality that we're trying to solve a technical problem of how we fit all of these trains on a line, and there are some hard answers there. What I'm showing you is really the result of going through probably 50 or 60 different service plans trying to match demand to supply. And again, these are illustrative frameworks. They're not definitive. They won't be precise, but they're in the general ballpark of what can be achieved with certain levels of investment and certain levels of community impact. So I want to at least, I think, present that we've tried to do this comprehensively. It's not that we went into a dark room somewhere and took a shot at something and came out with it. Unfortunately, the reality of doing that means that it's not possible to do everything that everyone might want.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. I do have one slip on this. Roland LeBrun, please, if you can make this brief, that would be great.
Let me just say something to you, is that before we get the Transbay Tube, you are going to get 12 trains an hour between San Francisco and Brisbane. And I'm going to try to explain that to you in 2 minutes. Where's the timer?
So you should see lights.
Oh, it's red.
Yeah.
Can't speak, right?
Okay, now it's green. Now it's green.
Oh, now it's green, okay.
Yeah, okay.
And now the clock is going.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's skip this. This is not a real presentation, but you did receive this. So that's the proposal. What you got to look at is the little blue lines on the other side, and you're going to see Transbay, Mission Bay, 22nd Street, and Bayshore. So that's basically, it's the service going to be coming across initially from the Trans Bay Terminal, but eventually be coming from the East Bay. Next slide. Council member Lenz may actually recognize that train. It's got the BART logo right now, but anyway, it's the trains the Caltrain should have bought and didn't buy. Next slide. Okay, now that's a slide I forgot to show you earlier, and that's the location of the light maintenance facility in Auckland at the bottom, which is right next to the new Amtrak maintenance facility. At the top, you can see the Transbay Tunnel portal, which is right next door to the Toll Bridge Plaza next. So that's the plan. It's the only proposal right now that actually crosses the existing Transbay Tube via Yerba Buena Island. Next slide. Okay, this shows you that if San Francisco redesigned the approach to Transbay Transit Center, they've got the same capacity within the center as they currently got in 4th and King. They don't need storage anywhere else. That would take longer to explain. Next slide. Okay, and now we're getting down to Brisbane. So what this shows you is your relocated station, and then we're going to get down to what's actually in the station. You're going to have 6 tracks, 2 outboard platforms, and then is a slide under trench I mentioned earlier. Is how you get to the light maintenance facility. Turnaround switching yard, which is what Sebastian was talking about. That's why I put in DIRs, was Caltrain storage. And you can see Geneva and Harney connecting to new station. Next slide, please, and we're done. Right, this is what it looks like. So you got showing actually is UPC presentation. And you can see Geneva, Harney at the top. You got the platform. There's Caltrain, southbound Caltrain is stopped. On the other side of that platform is where BART or whatever it is, these trains coming are going to go to the switching yard, turn around, and go right back to San Francisco. This is how you're going to get 12 trains an hour. 2 tracks in the middle is a high-speed train, 110 miles an hour. They don't stop. Actually, if anything happens in the tunnel, the system is designed so high-speed trains can actually stop in Brisbane, turn around, and go back the other way. If they cannot get to Transbay, they can take whatever. And the track width is at the bottom. And the other thing, with the crossovers, the only thing that has changed is now we have room between Ice House Hill and the tank farm for the 8-acre LMF. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak about this presentation? Okay. Consent calendar. We are moving along here. Okay, do I have a motion to accept items A through C and E?
So
Make a motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is that a second? Hold on, sorry, I went too quick. Is that a second? Okay, that's a second. All those in favor?
I'll second it.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That brings us to public hearing. Item A, Sierra Point Landscaping and Lighting District, and statement of engineer of record as to the nature of this project.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, this is an annual process to assess the Sierra Point property owners to maintain the upgraded lighting, landscaping, and irrigation at the system. There's a couple of steps you need to take, a statement for you to read, and then the city clerk, and then a public hearing.
Okay.
Can you speak up, please?
Sorry, this is the annually occurring process to assess the properties on Sierra Point for the assessment district to maintain the upgraded lighting and landscaping out there and irrigation along the paths and the lighting, the street lighting. And there's a process that happens that begins with the mayor reading a statement, the clerk, and then a public hearing.
Okay, so I'm going to get started on that. As the mayor of the city of Brisbane, I'm now going to read the opening statement. Opening statement by the mayor of the city of Brisbane, July 18th, 2019, Sierra Point Landscaping and Lighting District. This is the time and place set for the hearing on the engineer's report and the levy and collection of the proposed assessment for fiscal year 2019-2020 for the Sierra Point Landscaping and Lighting District. These proceedings were undertaken pursuant to the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. The engineer's report prepared by the engineer of work consists of the proposed improvements, the boundaries of the assessment district and any zones therein, the proposed diagram, the estimate of cost thereof, and the proposed assessments upon assessable lots and parcels of land within the district. Any one of these items may be subject of protests or endorsements. You are asked to clearly identify yourself and the property owned by you so that your statements may be correctly recorded. The hearing is declared open, and I will ask the city clerk to report on the various notices given in connection with this hearing. City clerk statement, please.
Notices have been mailed and posted as required by the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. Proofs of mailing and posting are on file in my office, and a copy of the engineer's report prepared by the engineer of work was filed in my office on May 29th, 2019. It has been open to public inspection since that time.
Okay, I would like to open the public hearing to hear any testimony. Can I get a first and a second? Oh, no, I don't think I need a first and a second to open it. Never mind. Anybody here wishing to speak on this? Can I get a first and a second to close the public hearing?
To close the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any council discussion? No?
I have nothing to say.
Okay, so that brings us to the next item. Consider adoption of resolution number 2019-7 overruling protests and ordering the improvements and confirming the diagram assessments for fiscal year 1920.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
City of Brisbane local stormwater program fees. There is no staff report on this item, so I'm going to open the public hearing and take any public comment. Would anyone like to speak on this? Seeing no one.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Number 2, consider adoption resolution number 2019-18, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Brisbane imposing charges for funding the local Brisbane stormwater program, authorizing placement of said charges on the 2019-2020 county tax roll, and authorizing the county tax collector to collect such charges.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2019-18.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Item C, Brisbane Weed Abatement Program. There is no staff report on this item, so I'd like to open the public hearing to hear any objections by the noticed property owners of properties on which a nuisance has been declared to exist within the Brisbane Weed Abatement Program. Anybody here to speak about that? No. Okay.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so giving that there are no objections, is there a first and a second to give direction to the enforcement officer to clear the properties that have not complied with this notice?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item D, consider adopting ordinance number 640 as an urgency ordinance of the City of Brisbane to take effect immediately upon its adoption regarding zoning text amendments to Chapter 17.32 and Chapter 17.36 of Title 17 zoning of the Brisbane Municipal Code to add Section 17.32.260 election signs, providing new regulations for election signs and amending Section 17.36.020 definitions to provide a cross-reference to the new election signs section. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Election signs have been placed on a variety of public and private locations in Brisbane over the years, but the city does not currently have an ordinance regulating such placement. So the city council directed staff to draft an ordinance to regulate election signage. This ordinance was reviewed by the Planning Commission in June of this year and made some recommendations. I'll get into them in a moment. And given the upcoming general election in November, the ordinance is proposed as an urgency ordinance, would take effect immediately, would then be in effect for the placement of campaign signs in the forthcoming election. The proposed ordinance would regulate election signs on both city property and private property, with placement on city property being limited in terms of a number of locations. I think Ingrid has can show that on the slide. There are 4 locations were originally identified where they have historically been placed over time. West Hill and Silver Spot is location 1. Guadalupe and Mission Blue is number 2. Monarch and Mission Blue, number 3. And then 4 Old County Road across from the park. When the Planning Commission considered this ordinance. They expressed concern that 3 of these locations were oriented toward Northeast Ridge, and they had recommended that location number 1 be removed and an alternative location closer to central Brisbane be considered in lieu of location number 1. So in response to that, staff has identified some other alternative locations that might be considered. One is near Quarry Road Park. I'm sorry, that's Inyo, yeah. And the next is near the Old County and Community Park. Another being near Brisbane Elementary School, and a fourth being near the city water pump station near Glen Park and Lake. So these are all locations that are city right-of-way that we believe can accommodate the kind of signage that people are interested in having. The ordinance also did include provisions for regulating signs on private property as well, and some of the criteria are basically 10 square feet signs, 3 feet in height maximum, also locations so they don't obstruct sight distance or create other kind of public hazard for drivers. They also need to remain unlit. So again, we're recommending adoption of the ordinance with the input from the council as to what your preferred locations are, whether you want to stick with the original 4 or want to consider one of the alternative locations. That's up for your consideration. That concludes staff's comments.
Any questions?
I have a comment.
Okay.
The entrance to Quarry Road kind of leaves me a little cold because most people are using Quarry Road as a place to relax, turn off from the world, take their dog for a walk, and not be hit with more politics. That's really my only comment, that I probably would not choose that location, just so we've got a little solace in our wanderings around town.
Okay.
I would rather just keep the 2 locations, one up at the Ridge signboard and one across from our local signboard. I think those are the best locations for public right-of-way signs, and I think that we're a small enough town that people come by those places enough that they will get the basic gist of who is running. But while I understand there is an upcoming election, I don't see why this is an urgency. It's not safety. It's not anything of that nature. So I sort of question the urgency portion of it, while I agree totally with its intent. So I'm not quite sure why it would be recommended for urgency other than...
The reason is that once the election season opens, city clerk will start fielding questions about where the people can put signs. It happens every 2 years. So we wanted to get this in place before this election cycle started.
Thank you. Cliff, do you have any questions?
Well, really just comment.
Well, can I open the public hearing and then we can have discussion?
Okay.
Afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there any member of the public wishing to speak about this? No. Okay. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, council discussion.
All right. So, I agree with you, Karen, that number 5 at the entrance to Quarry Road shouldn't be. Location number 6 is really close to location number 4.
Yeah.
So, then you're getting hit twice as you're coming in and going out of town. So, I think taking that one off. And
I did receive an objection specifically to location 7. People felt that was a hazard as people were dropping their kids off. People cross over that double yellow. It's not a it's not a great place for signs, and they might get kicked over right there anyways.
It might be nice to have some place that is available for people that come in on the back side of town to see signs, but again, they're sort of cheap and tacky.
Yeah, I'm good with just 2 of the 2 traditional locations. I didn't even know those other 2 were allowed. So
Yeah, last couple of elections.
I think they've been,
Having that, I always thought it was kind of odd, though, that there were 3 locations up at the Ridge and
Yeah.
only 1 in central Brisbane.
That's kind of fun.
But, I do think, if it's possible to have one at the San Bruno location, but maybe it's not feasible because we don't own any land there. Is that? Yeah, so,
And private signs, as long as they're not over 10 square feet, which is a pretty big sign, are allowed on private property, so.
Private property issues.
So.
Unless somebody had a big sign that was.
Big flashing billboard?
yeah, I'd be fine with just the 2
I think-
at each signboard.
I think it's better just the signboards and.
So we'll go from, whatever, 4 to 2.
Park on the side signboard?
So is there a motion to make those adjustments, or do we need to bring it back, or how do you want to do it?
Or incorporate them in your motion.
And I guess we would adopt this ordinance, number 640, in defining the 2 locations, be location number 3 near the signboard at the Ridge, and location number 4, which is across from the signboard in central Brisbane.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Oh, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to new business. Consider approval of a city employees' memorandums of understanding and employment contracts, which is resolution number 2019-45 through 2019-46, and then 2019-51 through 2019-54, resolutions of the City Council of the City of Brisbane concerning wages, hours, and working conditions for a number of different kinds of employees. Is that okay to state it that way? Okay. Is there a staff report on this item?
This is an item that staff has worked with the city council previously on. The city has come to a tentative agreement with all of our bargaining units but one. The staff report lines out in detail what all of the TA aspects of the TA are. If there are any questions on those, I am more than happy to take questions on that. Overall, the cost of the agreements is in the range of $2 million without the one that we don't have an agreement on yet. These are costs that have been included in previous projections that have been provided to the City Council. And including with this, there is still money available, as we had discussed at the previous meeting, to put money aside for our pension and our OPEB, and still have money available in the future for capital improvements or other city programs.
Okay. Council questions?
No. I have none.
Public comment? Seeing no one interested. Council discussion? Is there a first and a second to adopt resolutions 2019-45 through 50 and 52, or 2019-52 through 54?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2019-45 through 21950 and 21952 through 54.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item B, consider adoption of resolution number 2019-55 approving the employment agreement with the city manager. So I am to read a statement which goes as follows. In accordance with Government Code Section 54953C3, a summary of the city manager's salary and benefits is reported as follows. The biweekly salary for the city manager will be $9,551.20 with an annual escalator, if approved by the City Council, of 3% in July 2020 and 3% in July 2021. The city manager will receive 80 hours of administrative leave in August 2019, 2020, and 2021, but such leave must be used within 12 months from the time the leave is granted. Consistent with the benefits provided to department heads of the city manager will receive paid time off for holidays and vacation leave and is eligible for health benefits which include vision, dental, and comprehensive medical insurance. Other benefits include life and disability insurance as well as workers' compensation. Provision in the agreement concerning 2 city loans for the manager's house in Brisbane is updated to note that one loan was paid in full in 2016. The other loan, equal to 20% of the value of the property, remains and will be repaid when the property sells or within 6 months of the manager's retirement. Upon retirement from the city, anticipated to be December 30th, 2021, the city manager will receive a monthly stipend consistent with other retired executive management employees who started working for the city prior to July 2008 and retired after 2000. Council questions?
Okay, questions?
No question.
Public comment? Seeing no one interested on this item, council discussion. Is there a first and a second to adopt resolution number 2019-55?
I make a motion to adopt resolution number 2019-55, approving the employment agreement with the city manager.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item C, consider authorizing the city manager to execute a professional service agreement with the urban design firm as recommended by the City Council Baylands Subcommittee. Staff report, please.
I'll just start this off real quickly and then ask John to speak to this. This is an item that we have been talking about for a period of time, to have the city have our own planning consultant to represent us in the development of the specific plan, and also to help guide us on certain issues relative to the development agreement. This is kind of a unique sort of position in terms of planning, because we're not asking them to actually do the plan, but we're asking them to critique the applicant's plan, as well as to take on specific items that we may see as important, such as transportation issues. I could see affordable housing could be another one where we want to make kind of stake out our own position.
Sustainability.
And certainly the sustainability stuff. And we have another consultant on that one. This did go through a process with the council's Baylands subcommittee, and I'm going to let John kind of speak to how we chose the consultants that we asked for applications from, and then the process with the subcommittee.
Oh, yes, thanks, Clay. So, again, like other professional services agreement related to planning, it was done with the original Baylands EIR. It was done with the Parkside project. Typically what happens is staff identifies first a scope of work that's been coordinated with, in this particular case, the city manager and the Baylands subcommittee, as to what the actual services that we're looking for from a consultant. At that point, once that's defined, then staff will do due diligence in terms of coming up with a list of potentially qualified consultants. And that's developed a few ways. Often do consult with peers in the county who have done hiring consultants, my peers, planning directors in San Mateo, also my peers throughout the Bay Area. I do research in terms of projects that are similar, that are complex, that people are working on. You look at the depth of the firm, their capability, to make sure, again, they're going to have the ability to handle the scope of the project. And at that point, we came up with a short list of about 5 firms at that point that we sent out a formal request for proposal to. 3 of those firms responded and were interviewed by the subcommittee late last week and early this week. And as a result of that selection process, it was recommended that the city enter into an agreement with MIG to provide these services. MIG is the firm that provided the work for Parkside, but it is a different project manager and a different team of individuals from MIG who will be performing the work for the city. I think they showed a lot of depth in terms of their technical capability. The project manager is very passionate, I think, about being an advocate for the city's desires and needs. That's what I got out of the interviews, but I'll defer to the subcommittee if they want to chime in a bit.
Happy to speak on this item. We interviewed 3 different firms. There was one firm who definitely stood out above the rest by a long shot, which was MIG, who we've previously worked with on Perkside. It's a different team than the team that we worked with last time. But maybe some of those people might be working behind the scenes at some point. We really liked that they went above and beyond and tailored their presentation specifically to Brisbane, specifically to what they felt that the community has been saying about the site, really speaking towards how to secure community benefits, how to make the site sustainable, elements of inspiration, not just from their own work, but from developments across the world, which we felt was very interesting that they actually came in and talked about things that have been implemented elsewhere beyond just the stuff that they've worked on. And so most of the other firms really focused on all about them and all about their projects, and this firm really spent the bulk of the time talking specifically to Brisbane and saying, here, this is what we've already heard your community say. And there was clearly a lot of effort there in the information that they collected prior. They read the sustainability framework. They even pointed out elements in the sustainability framework where we can go much further. So we really felt that they were the most equipped, most informed, and instead of, on both of the other presentations, Cliff and I really had to communicate what we wanted to see for the site, and these people came in pretty much already knowing. So we felt that just by that standard, they really demonstrated a commitment to the project, an effort to understand it, and there's already, I think, a lot of that knowledge there that we wouldn't have to then explain to them. So ultimately, we felt really aligned and really excited about some of the ideas that they were putting forth. And we think that they would become great partners for the city. So is there anything else that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, just really just chiming in what you had said, Madison. The examples that they brought to the table, they were then applying them to what could be implemented into the Baylands, right? As Madison said, they weren't just showing examples. This is what we've done. What do you think? It's just like, yeah, this is how you can, create a much more sustainable development than, your average development. They were super excited about the project. And sometimes it's having that vibe, that feeling like, okay, you know what, these folks would be strong advocates for us, but they were also willing to not only challenge the developer but challenge us. Yeah. They looked at the sustainability framework and they said, yeah, you got some great things here, and then there was the but. And some of the things that you have in this document, maybe when it was written, was very innovative, but technology is moving so quickly, and so they were saying, yeah, we could definitely help you in these areas that are important to you, and so that's why. And then the other 2 firms, they didn't have the right stuff.
Do you guys have any questions about?
No, I don't.
I just want to, we don't really have a financial or scope of work, and that's going to be worked out in the future on this?
That's correct. They were given, I think we gave them sort of a not to exceed amount as kind of a starter, not to exceed $150,000, but with actual tasks and scopes to be defined as we evolve.
Okay, and this RFP that was put out, that was publicized on our website?
Yes, it was sent, it was published. The city does have a page where requests for proposals are posted. I did receive 2 inquiries from other firms who had, we had a conversation about whether they'd be interested in making a proposal, and neither of them did make a proposal based on their review of our website.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Public comment? Seeing no one interested, We'll move to council discussion. Is there a first and a second to authorize the city manager to execute a professional service agreement with the urban design firm as recommended by the city council Balance Subcommittee?
I think that should come from the subcommittee.
Okay. So I'll make that motion then to authorize city manager to execute a professional service agreement with MIG as recommended by the city council Balance Subcommittee.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, staff reports. City manager's report on upcoming activities.
I'll try to do this very quickly, given the hour. So tomorrow night, another concert in the park, Billy Martini, from 6 to 8:30. Saturday is our annual citywide yard sale from 9 to 3 p.m., and I believe there's a barbecue in the park on also. And then our annual National Night Out on Tuesday, August 6, 2019. We'll be at the Brisbane Community Park with the Brisbane Police Department, and community is invited to attend that. And the Star City San Bruno Mountain Half Marathon and 5K. I think this is the first year of this, or the second year?
Is this
Something,
second?
one of those.
Second.
Second year. That will be on Saturday, August 17th at 10 a.m. That's it.
Okay, moving right along. Mayor Council Matters. Item A, Education Ad Hoc Subcommittee requests for use of funds to study charter school options. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an item that is being brought to the full City Council from the Education Ad Hoc Subcommittee. Over the last several months, the committee, which is council members Lentz and Mayor Davis, have had the opportunity to reach out and have meetings with the Bayshore School District, the Brisbane Elementary School District, and with the Jefferson Union High School District. Discussions have been, I think, informative, and a lot of, I think, very honest exchanges have taken place in that process. One of the things that the subcommittee would like to get more information on as they continue their conversations with these groups, we have something set up with, or will be having something set up with the Bayshore District in August, but we'd like to get some more information on funding and cost opportunity or cost issues with regards to a K-12 charter school. And I have discussed this with the UPC. We do have money in our fund that studies school options, and they have agreed to fund this. That's why you have the $16,900 amount there, which is the amount of money that's still left in that fund. We don't really actually think it will take that much money, but wanted to get the authorization up to that. I'll let the subcommittee speak to their perspectives in terms of the need for this.
Do you mind if I say something to start? Okay. So after working on this subcommittee, my perspective on the timing for this has changed. Cliff and I have had multiple meetings with different school districts, and all of them seem to have a willingness to explore this idea. They've all expressed interest in having a high school that is closer to the Brisbane community and the Bayshore community, but really no one can move further in determining this without more of a feasibility study and understanding what is going to be required to make a charter school here work. That is the only type of school that would work here that would give the high school component. Of course, a K through 8 or just a middle school or just an elementary school could work, but without being a charter school. But in order to get the high school component, it would need to be a charter school K through or TK through 12. And so because we're moving forward with the specific plan process, it's really important now to move forward with this because we need to identify a place on the site that would be the site of this school, and it's really important for the districts to have the economic feasibility done because they are not going to they're not going to be able to make any types of decisions without that information. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. This study would provide that information. Yes, we don't know exactly the amount of units or the type of units, but a range would be studied, and also really looking at, how do we finance that charter school? What is that going to take? So because we have a willingness from all three districts to look at this, that's why we're bringing this forward to you now. Is there anything else that you would like to? Okay. Do you have any questions for us or for staff at this time?
So you're asking for $16,000?
A total not to exceed $16,900.
Which is what's remaining in the fund.
Correct.
But I thought when we had the initial study of schools and feasibilities that we spent quite a bit more on, they said that it was going to be another $50,000 to really look at the economics of a high school and school financing.
Well, you authorized additional funding in February, but contingent upon the project being, the specific plan being submitted and being able to do the analysis on the number of students by the number of units and the types of units. So that we presumably we may have to go back to UPC and ask for additional funding to do that when we get to that point. But I did ask them if they would be willing to fund out of the remaining dollars in the fund at this point, this aspect of the study.
But why are they able to do it at such a lesser cost than what was previously said it was going to be another $50,000?
Well, this is an entirely different analysis.
Well, also back in February, the anticipation was that the 16,900 was going to be able to complete the study on the economics. The reason you allocated additional money, the additional 50,000, was because the cost of the attorneys was higher than we had anticipated.
We got overcharged.
We're eaten into the 50,000 that you had approved in February. Out of the complete amount of money, which I think was in the 90,000 range, there is 16,900 still available.
And who are we proposing to do this study?
We are looking at the same economic firm that was looking at the information on the economics. This sense we got from staff was that Kathy and Terry did a good enough job to provide you information on the economics, and that we would use them again to finish the economic study. So we would use them for this economic study.
It's not the first.
But we're not using the law firm that we had used before. This is just an economic
I would
look
hope
at
not.
it.
Yeah, the second group we heard from.
Yes.
Because that was a waste of money.
Agreed. So, on that study, it outlined probably 12 different ways that we could accomplish a high school. So from there, Cliff and I, in meeting with the 3 school districts, have identified that of all of those different options, right now, the one that seems to be of interest to everybody would be the TK through 12 charter school. So that is why now that we have identified a route, it's going to be, now that economic feasibility can be done specifically on that route that could be taken, and we're hoping to get that information now rather than later, because it may inform the way that the development is planned in terms of how big of a site is going to be needed and what the Bayshore and Brisbane school districts are going to need to do in preparation for any changes that might be made in order to accomplish this. So that's why we're coming now. Any other council questions?
No, I'm just glad that the 3 school districts are willing to talk.
They are. We're moving forward. So I know that there are members of the public here who have been waiting a long time to talk about this item. So I've been trying to get to this moment for the last 20 minutes. So I would love to invite Michael Barnes up to speak about the school study.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes. It appears that the City Council is about to blow through about $90,000 studying the Baylands' impact on schools, and according to the city manager's memo, you're planning to spend even more after the Baylands specific plan is submitted. I remember at the February 21st City Council meeting, 3 council members said they wanted a specific plan before spending more money on a school study. Even the city manager said, we're not going to spend more money on this financial until we have a proposal from the developer. Your economic consultant already defined that there is not enough money to build a high school, and she also identified that there is not enough ongoing revenue to sustain a high school, and probably not enough students as well, but that depends on the specific plan that you still don't have. Thankfully, the public schools are not your domain. Schools are the jurisdiction of the school districts, as authorized and financed by the great state of California. The City Council's job is to negotiate a development agreement that meets the needs of all Brisbane, not to finance an unsustainable school. The community responded to the 2015 city survey with 7 items that had more support than a high school. 1, preserving open space and wetlands. 2, expanding bike lanes and trails. 3, building new parks. 4, building renewable energy generation facilities. 5, building a transit hub. 6, retail establishments. And 7, facilities for technical and industrial R&D. You've spent nothing to study the top 7 community benefits identified by the people of Brisbane, yet you've spent about $75,000 studying an arts or STEM or sports or environmental studies high school, and now after all that money you are starting all over again, this time with a K-12 school. But Brisbane parents have not been asking for a charter K-12 school. They've been asking for a high school, which your consultant made clear is not feasible. If the City Council really wants a K-12 school, put some portable trailers at Brisbane Elementary and fill them with high school students. I can't imagine that vaping, swearing high schoolers driving recklessly among 6-year-olds is a good mix, but maybe that's your vision. Test it here before obligating yourselves to building on the Baylands. Currently, this is not a balanced, well-researched investigation of Baylands community benefits. This is a study with only one goal, a Baylands school at any cost. If you continue studying schools, you set the expectation that a high school is possible. The only way Brisbane can have a high school is if Brisbane sacrifices other community benefits. I recommend you study the cost of the top 7 community benefits from the city survey and let the community know what community benefits Brisbane will lose if you pursue the K-12 charter school. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we did just authorize $150,000 to be spent on a urban planning team, which will be studying all of those things and also the high school as well. So we are definitely doing our due diligence on that front. Is there any council discussion here on this item?
No.
No.
Would you like to make a motion? Wait, is there any other public comment? Okay.
I don't think we need to make a motion on this, correct?
Yes.
You want some? Okay, so, yeah, authorize, I guess, the city manager to work with the economic school study consultants in regards to charter school options.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed.
Okay, and opposed. Terry O'Connell. B, designation of voting delegates and alternates for the League of California Cities Annual Conference. Councilmember Lentz, Cunningham, and I will be attending the League of California Cities Annual Conference in Long Beach. I also heard today that Clark is planning to attend. So we do need to vote. Is there a first and a second to designate myself as the voting delegate and Councilmember Lentz and Cunningham as alternates for the conference?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we need to even make that motion? Shouldn't the mayor just automatically be the
Well, I think we always
authorizing
bring it just,
person?
I mean, it's always been the custom if the mayor attends, the mayor votes.
Just in case something happens. You never know. Okay. Countywide assignments / subcommittee reports. Reports, let's start down on this end.
Okay, so June 25th, I had the honor of attending a school visit with the JPA Library people for the Big Lift program. which seemed like it was going swimmingly well, and all the kids were having an amazing time at very little cost to their families. And I hadn't seen it before, and it sure looked like a program that was working really well. So I just wanted to share that. June 27th was the EMS board meeting, and PG&E made a presentation on wildfire safety and the public safety shutoff program that they're planning. It seemed a little alarming to me relative to if they had to shut off electricity for a long period of time in places like Sacramento and where it gets very hot, that this could be pretty awful. But there is a lot of information available publicly at pgne.com/wildfire safety for people who are interested in finding out more about this program. They, at the EMS meeting, there was also something that I want to bring up, and I'm not sure where we're at with that, but there's going to be new flight noise monitors from SFO that are put in to measure airplane noise. But what's really interesting about the plan is that they've changed all of the flight routes, but the plan is to put the noise monitors in the places where the old routes were, which really doesn't make a bean of sense to anybody. And so the suggestion from the head of the EMS people down there was that each city write a letter opposing this ridiculous thought process to SFO, which I'm assuming we're doing, or we've already done. But I think, and I saw posted on our Residents of Brisbane Facebook page, somebody going, "Yay, here's a new noise monitor." And what I wanted to say, not so fast. So I don't know where we're at with that, but it just seemed pretty ridiculous to me, and obviously they're asking for us to complain about it. Then, straight after the EMS board meeting was the BPAC meeting, where we discussed the various grants that were coming in from around the place and how that was going to work, and obviously we're making an application for Brisbane. So fingers crossed that we will be successful in receiving a grant.
How do you like being on that committee?
That was a very good suggestion, Cliff. Thank you very much.
I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah, okay, great.
No, it's actually a lot more interesting than I thought. When you first said I should be on it, I was like, what's wrong with him? But you were right. You were totally right.
Yeah, good for you.
And then last night, Terry and I had a planning issues subcommittee meeting, and we will be asking the Planning Commission to have a look at the 400, how are we explaining that, John?
Garage exemption.
Garage exemption thing?
Garage exemptions to floor area ratio.
So, and my thought on that is trying to get more cars off the street. Okay. So we'll see where that lands.
We had a discussion on that, whether the discussion of the floor area ratio, if that was the right place for it, and because the exemption for the garage space it lives in that area, it really was, it sounded different than what
I was
what Karen was trying to bring up, but basically it's not to try to increase the size of homes on small lots. The ultimate recommendation that direction we gave to staff to bring to planning was how, if there were a larger exemption for garages, how we could actually get cars off the street, and if that would be successful in doing that, and how it could be implemented. So we sent that to be looked at by the Planning Commission in that direction, not in increasing home size.
Okay, that sounds good.
And then we talked about the tree.
Yeah. Oh, yes, we did.
We talked about trees.
We talked about trees.
Great.
And I think staff is going to be bringing back some revisions for the council to review on the tree ordinance that I think is going to address most of the questions and the concerns that came up in our initial discussion of the revised tree ordinance.
Great. Okay, is that all you have, Terry?
I think so.
Okay, so Cliff and I, as stated, we met with the Brisbane School District, and we summarized to them what we had heard from Bayshore and what we had heard from Jefferson Union High School District, and really talking about the future opportunities for education out of the Baylands. I also attended a BB-CAG meeting this week. Council members Lentz and Cunningham were present. Really, I felt it was a great discussion. I believe it was televised. There is a record if anyone would like to watch it. But the developer answered all the questions that came from the community. I felt that the questions seemed to be answered in detail, and the public seemed to be receptive of those answers. So I believe all in all, it was a great meeting. Cliff and I also met with a bunch of transit agencies the other day, and we had robust conversations about what transit at the Baylands will look like, really emphasizing from our perspective and from Greg's perspective, representing UPC, how important it is for these agencies to put aside all their personal constraints from their agencies and really looking at how we can collaborate despite the difficulties that might entail. And just because that may seem daunting, that's not a reason to not do it. And so we kept emphasizing that the reason why I think our transit doesn't work very well right now in the Bay Area is because a lot of these agencies have not been collaborative with each other and have not really thought about how all of these modes of transit are interconnected with each other and maximizing ways that people can connect between different types of transit in a fluid and easy manner, which would encourage public transit and diminish the amount of time that it takes to get from one place to another using public transit. So we challenge them to be open and receptive to this process, and so I think that all of them understood, and we emphasize, if transit's really important to you, public transit, it shouldn't be that, oh, well, I only really care about my agency, which is Caltrain, or I only really care about BART, or I only really care about Muni, those different things. It shouldn't necessarily be about your specific agency, but how are we moving people together? So it was very informative, and I'm hoping for many more meetings like that. But hopefully moving towards a solution and a multimodal station. Anything you'd like to add?
No, you said it perfectly, Madison. I mean, it was a good forum. It was a lively discussion. It is kind of unfortunate, though, that we had some San Mateo County representatives, and a couple of them, they only said their name, and that was it.
Yeah, one was asleep.
So, but I had this CCAG meeting last week, and the TA gave a presentation about Measure A funds and then Measure W funds, and how these funds are going to be used, and they talked about how they're doing this great robust community outreach, and so then of course I had to say, well, we have this workshop, and as far as I know, none of you are attending, right? They didn't. There was no RSVP from anyone from the TA until we put some pressure on them that afternoon. So, but not to put them under the bus, no pun intended, but the San Mateo County TA really does need to get engaged, right? This needs to be a priority for them. I mean, it's almost like the Brisbane to San Francisco somehow, right? And of course, San Francisco, they, as you were saying, Madison, it can't just be about my agency or about my city. We have to be looking at transportation as a regional benefit for everyone. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is by working together. So, yeah, so that was interesting. But I felt it was, I thought it was a pretty good discussion, and I felt that, the next meeting, hopefully is going to move the needle.
Yep. Anything else you want to report out on?
No, that is it.
Okay. So, City Council meeting schedule. The meetings of August 1st and August 15th are canceled. The next meeting is going to be on September 5th. That brings us to written communications, which were Joe and Jerry Sully on June 25th regarding Airbnb in Brisbane. Tony Varios on July 9th, links to whistleblower reports regarding toxic cleanup failures. Roland LeBrun on July 18th, California high-speed rail preferred alternative item, and Michelle DeZitzer on July 18th, expanding current cannabis ordinances to include M1.
Madam Mayor, I just have two things I just want to bring up real quick.
Okay.
That's okay. So, John, I have a question for you. Did the Planning Commission choose who is going to be part of the Baylands Subcommittee?
I gave them until Friday to indicate their interest, and I've heard from 2 commissioners so far who have interest. I'll know by the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then, so we had this presentation from High Speed Rail. How does the council feel about putting forth a resolution that states our position? I know that, it isn't something we've talked with the city attorney about, but I don't know. It seems like we're pretty united about thinking that this isn't such a good idea. But does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, when you were having your discussion tonight, I mean, there's they're asking for comment, right? So we can certainly draft a letter, and if you would like, we could bring that letter back to the September 5th meeting with a resolution.
Yes, we have lots of comments to make.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you good with that, Tom?
Absolutely, and just for what it's worth, and I just have to say this for my mental health, indulge me, I went over and talked to them during the break, and just somebody spoke up, I don't know the gentleman's name, and explained to the other 2, did you hear what they were saying? You're telling them you know.
And you don't.
Oh, you don't.
Yeah.
And the engineer certainly seemed to get it, and I think the gentleman who has to present, I'm not going to use his name on camera, feels he has to stick to a script. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I've talked to him offline, and he's been much more understanding of the dilemma everybody's in. But still, I think the council should be heard, and I've done this for 25 years, and that it's been a long time since I had somebody come in to something this important and be so unaware of the import of their words. And this is after an hour, roughly, of preparation on a call last week with them, with your city staff. So I think the council should be heard. I said that, I guess, for my own mental health, but I also want it on the record that it's unconscionable. I thought the way the Caltrain gentleman handled it is exactly the way you handle something. If you don't know, you don't know. And you impress that time's of the essence, which you did, Councilmember Lentz. And I really hope High Speed Rail comes back with that understanding of the importance of this to the city. I mean, that what they described tonight's foreign to what I think any of us have ever heard before.
It was shocking.
Correct.
It was. And, I know it's late, but, either they're really ignorant to what's going on the east side, or that's kind of a bait and switch thing. It's like they know how upset the community would be if you had to destroy Ice House Hill. Right, and so it's bizarre, what they're putting forth, and
they've seen an open piece of land that was formerly a rail yard, and they said, okay, this works.
To me,
that's
the side B, if they're going to choose a spot, it's going to be that, right?
Well, I think that they are people in protection mode because there is no funding. They have a job to do and a contract to do what they need to do to cover their bases for the moment. And, none of them are going to have a job if somebody doesn't pony up some more money for this project. And I'm not sure anybody is going to pony up more money for this project. So right now, it's all speculation that they're ever going to even want that rail yard. But they've got to go through the motions. And so they're doing it half-baked.
I think the letter's really important for that reason. I think there's a lot of truth in everything that's been said. And I'll add something else because it gets to the frustration of the council, so it should be on the record. I was asking him pretty basic questions.
Mm-hmm.
And he was acting like I was clueless. And it was a person in the audience who came up as soon as you called the break, Madam Mayor, and said, well, it's in this code section, it's in this code, which is I didn't have the code sections in front of me, but I've done this long enough, I knew where these things were. So I do think there's a protection, and I think there's a script, and they're not, I don't want to say they are. There's a penchant to go with the script, and I'm not sure that there's a penchant to hear what's actually being asked.
Right.
Because when they paused and thought, we did get people coming up to the mic and saying, oh no, this. So hopefully it's better with comment letter, but I think you're absolutely right to have a comment letter, sorry.
I'll just add, since some people may be watching this at this late hour, but the issue that the council, I think, really drilled in on tonight on do you really understand the east side? Do you understand the soils there? Do you understand that? Is something the staff has been saying to them, I want to say for 10 years, and they just have never done the work.
Well, they're having conversations with earmuffs on, saying that just so that they can say that they're having conversations. Oh, well, we've been meeting. Well, if you're not listening, does that really count?
Well, they have also been meeting with the developer, and the developer has told them, probably, no way are you going to get the west side. And financially, it might be better for the developer to offload the east side. But who knows? Who knows how it's all going to play out?
And why 100 acres?
It's because they have to park the darn trains there. It is nothing to do with servicing it. It's parking them.
Yep.
Well, that bridge is going to, that Geneva extension is going to look like the Gateway Arch. And St. Louis, I mean, isn't it? That's what you're going to be driving over. Hey, drive over Geneva. It's going to be like a half circle is what it's going to, a rainbow. That's going to be the shape. So feasible.
Rainbow Bridge, I like that.
We're painting it rainbow. If this is happening, you heard it here first, folks.
It's like, but no, it's got to be at track level.
So, so we got to move on because it's that time. It's oral communications number 2. We have nobody here, so we're going to move to adjournment. And do I have a first and a second?
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.